I don't see Kevin on yet. Does anybody else? Okay. But it is 4 o'clock and we do have a quorum. So I am going to open up the Thompson Springs Special Service Fire District Administrative Control Board regular meeting. It is Tuesday, April 20th, 2021, and the time is 4 o'clock. Present are Commissioners Trissa Dean, Gabriel Wojtek, Jacques Hadler, Evan Clapper, Sarah Stock, and Mary McGann. We also have on the line as staff, Quinn Hall, Clerk Auditor. I don't see Christina Sloan yet. Does anybody? Oh, Kevin Walker, Commissioner, has joined us. Chris Baird, Commission Administrator. Mallory Nassau, Associate Commissioner Administrator. We will begin by asking if there are any citizens to be heard. Are there any citizens to be heard? Usually not.
Yeah, I want to be heard.
This is Thompson Springs, Kent.
I'm sorry.
Okay. We don't see any citizens to be heard, so I will entertain a motion to adopt the minutes from March 16th, 2021. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Kevin Walker, seconded by Jacques Hadler. Discussion. Seeing none, all in favor of passing the minutes of March 16th, 2021, say aye and/or raise your hand. Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. We are to ratification of bills. We have total bills in $564.32. Total bills and payroll $1,097.66. Do I have a motion to approve bills as read? Motion by Kevin Walker. Do I have a second? Seconded by Evan Clapper. Discussion? Call for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We are now to Chief's report. Chief Markham, take it away.
Thank you. I'll go over the recent incidents. On March 12th, we had a single car accident way at the end of the road to Thompson Canyon. Luckily, someone just happened to be hiking up there and found this car that went about 8 foot over an embankment and the patient inside. On March 25th, one of the pumps we used to fill the fire truck at the airport malfunctioned, so I was able to run back to Thompson, grab engine 41, our big engine there, come back and refill the rescue fire truck here in time for the flight. So we didn't have to delay the flight or anything like that, which was good. April 14th was a busy day for me. We had a motor vehicle accident at 6 in the morning and then a medical call at the Thompson 7-Eleven at around noon. A guy got maced by his girlfriend. So I went there and not sure why, able to get there and rinse his eyes out. And then he was checked out by EMS and released. And then at about 6 p.m., there was a semi truck that rolled over on I-70 at mile marker 229, pretty close to Colorado, but on our side. And it actually, the sparks caused a brush fire. Lower Valley Fire Department got there first. I got there shortly thereafter. It ended up being about a 3.6 acre brush fire. As I spoke about in one of the earlier meetings, the BLM and the Forest Service, their engines are way down in Ken's Lake. It was actually 2 hours until they were able to get on that scene. So lucky between Lower Valley and myself, we were able to get that thing under control. That fire actually is eligible for state billing, so I will be billing the state for my engine for use on that fire because it's way out of my district and on BLM land. Training on April 9th, Moab Valley Fire Department hosted a live fire training what they call the flashover trailer. It's a big closed metal trailer with wood inside, and they bring it up to very high temperatures, 800 to 1,000 degrees. And it's kind of a fire behavior training where we're all in full PPE, SCBAs, and we learn what to look for in order to get out of a structure on fire in time so that we don't get burned up. And it was a great training. There was some classroom session with that too. So thank you, Moab, for hosting that. On April 10th, we did have Thompson Springs Chipper Day out in Thompson. The state brought out their big chipper, and we were able to chip several properties worth of trees and debris that they had brought down and reduce some of the fuel load out there. Our Thompson Springs Community Action Team continues to meet via Zoom or Google every Tuesday morning. So that's going well. Our next big event is going to be a dumpster day out in Thompson on June 10th through 15th, and there'll be more advertising for that for the citizens out there. On April 11th, I completed the arduous pack test. It's a 3-mile walk with 45 pounds on your back. You have to do it in 45 minutes to be able to qualify for fighting another year of wildland firefighter. So it gets a little harder as I get older every year, but I was able to do that again this year. And then the great news is the backup generator is being installed today. So we will have backup power at the fire station for any kind of emergencies, power outages, things like that. Not just for my department, but if things go down in the community, they'll have a place to go and stay warm or cool and take some shelter. So really happy about that. And that's all I have, unless there's any questions.
Questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mark. There are no future considerations unless someone has some. There's no closed session. We've reached the end of this agenda, so I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you. We will now open the regular meeting of the Grand County Commission. The time is 4:07. Present commissioners Trish Hadeen, Gabriel Wojtek, Kevin Walker, Jacques Adler, Evan Clapper, Sarah Stocks, and myself, Mary McGann. Clerk Auditor Quinn Hall, County Administrator, Commission Administrator Chris Baird, Associate Commission Administrator Mallory Nassau, and Tara Collins, Commission Assistants in the office. I've had some requests to hear from Brady on what's going on. People have been concerned because Grand County's cases are much higher than the surrounding counties. So I've asked him to give a short update today. Brady?
Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Commission. I do have some graphics, but I will just send those to the Commission later on, stuff that we worked on over the past day or so as we look into this. Grand County's case rates per 100,000 people are higher than the other part of the district and most of the rest of the state. In fact, Grand County is the highest right now in the state. It is important to consider that Grand County hasn't really surged in cases. It's just stayed steady while the rest of the state has decreased, and certainly a little bit of concern, at least about that, and wondering why. As we break that down, there's a couple things that stand out. One is that as far as we know, at least, none of the cases have been vaccinated. We don't do most of the case investigations anymore. We do our school-aged children, and we but most of the rest of those go to the state. So the data is one step away from us. So that may not be 100% accurate, but it's very close. And over the course of March and April, that equates to 147 cases. And so no vaccinations in that group. So that's very important to know. Additionally, it's also worth noting that while Grand County's overall vaccination enthusiasm and acceptance has been fairly high. You know, we're nearing 60% of the eligible population with at least one dose of vaccine. Interestingly enough, they haven't had a single group really overly vaccinate in that time. And to give you an example, just consider that in Carbon and Emery counties, where the vaccination rates are 40-45%, nearly 90% of those that are 65 and older have been vaccinated. For whatever reason, in Grand County, that number is just barely approaching 70% in the last week. So they haven't had one group eliminated, so to speak, from the pool of people that can get infections. And as we look again over, particularly in April, Grand County has 21 individuals that are have become infected since April started in that age group, whereas Carbon and Emery counties with basically 3 times the population only have 11 people in that same time period that have been sick. So now that we're approaching 70%, and that will continue to creep higher, I do think we'll start to eliminate that higher risk age group from the infection pool. Additionally, as we look about it, over March and April, we've had 112 cases fall in the gene pool from 40 or from 0 to 49. And that accounts for 76% of Grand County's total caseload in that time. And that same
Someone needs to mute. Thank you.
And that same group has only accounts for 37% of total vaccinations given in Grand County in that same time. So from 2 to 10 years old, there's 12 cases. From 11 to 19, 26 cases. So those are 20 to 29, 22 cases. Those are pretty significant numbers in groups of in population groups that don't have high vaccination rates at this time. And then finally, I think we do see tourism bringing in cases, and then those are taken home and then transmitted within a family of or a household group of 2 to 3 to 4 people. So where you start off with 1 case, you end up with 3 or 4, and all those things combined, I think, put us where we are. The good news is that it's not, we don't see much severe disease and hospitalization with this. So from my point of view, certainly we're paying attention, not alarmed at this point. But so that's kind of a summary of where we're at. So I'm wondering what questions others have.
Questions from the council or commission? Kevin?
So you mentioned that the investigating individual cases is not handled by your office. Is it being handled at all by someone else, or is there anyone who could characterize like which types of, whether this is primarily people who work in the tourism industry, primarily young people, anything like that?
Yeah, we still have access to the data. It's still being done. The state has a contact tracing team that we turn many of those over to, except for those related to school cases. It's just that when we're doing the investigations, we're 100% sure the data is complete. When we're pulling it from people outside of our organization, we don't have quite the same read on the completeness, the totality of the interview. But those investigations still are happening.
Thank you. Anyone else? No one? Okay, thank you very much, Brady. Yeah, it was concerning to see that we were the highest in the state and we've managed to do
Yeah.
pretty. So thank you for reporting. Does anyone else have any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We are to citizens to be heard. The public hearing to hear public input for repealing Title 11 noise of the Grand County General Ordinance and related Ordinance 604 and adopting a new Title 11 noise pollution closed at 5 o'clock on Wednesday, April 14th. According to our policy, we do not accept public comment on a public hearing item, excuse me. We do not hear public comment on a public hearing item after the hearing has closed. Therefore, we are not accepting public comment on item J, noise ordinance, during the citizens to be heard. Mallory or Chris, if anyone attempts to make comments concerning item J, would you please mute them? Thank you. We are opening up citizens to be heard, comments on anything except for item J. Thank you. Do we have any citizens to be heard?
I see a few folks on, but I believe that they're probably on to listen to item J. If I'm wrong, please raise your hand with the emoji, send a chat, or press *6 to unmute. Otherwise, Mary, I don't believe that we have anybody at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kent Green has raised his hand. Kent, it sounds like you can proceed, though again, not about the item J.
I'm not going to speak. It is about item J. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, thank you. Then, Mary, I don't believe we have anybody.
Okay, thank you. We are to approval of minutes. Approval of minutes for April 6, 2021, April 12th, 2021, April 13th, 2021, and April 15th, 2021. Do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the minutes for April 6, 2021, the regular commission meeting, as well as April 12th, 2021, April 13th, 2021, and April 15th, 2021.
Motion by Jacques Hadler. Do we have a second? Seconded by Gabriel Wojtek. Discussion. Once again, Quinn, thank you for the timely minutes. It's very much appreciated. Very much appreciated. Since there are no comments, I will call for the vote. All in favor of accepting the minutes, say aye, raise your hand, or both. Thank you. Any opposed? Seeing none, the motion passed, unanimously. Ratification of payment of bills.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Gabriel?
I would make a motion to approve Grand County bills for April 20th or on April 20th, 2021. Total bills in the amount of $467,899.85. Total payroll in the amount of $260,490.92. And total bills and payroll combined in the amount of $728,390.77.
Thank you, Gabriel. A motion by Gabriel. Do I have a second? Seconded by Kevin Walker. Discussion. I was excited to see the community child care grant. And I understand that they're close to being ready to open, which is very exciting to have a daycare for infants. Any other comments? Okay, I will call for a vote. All in favor of the bill, approval of the bills, raise your hand, say aye, or both. Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. We are to commission member disclosures. Do I have any commissioners that need to come make a disclosure on anything on the agenda today? Okay, there are no commissioners making disclosures. We will move to commission reports and future considerations. Trish.
Hang on one second. Sorry. Oh, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm trying to do a couple of things at one time. I'm just pulling up my, so other than all the, the meetings that we've had in the last week, I've just had a few that are exclusive from that. So I had a planning commission meeting. OB continues to work on our Spanish Valley survey. He's been putting a lot of work into that. So I'm really excited when that will eventually roll out, and we'll pull some of that information. We had 3 pretty, just engaging periods of public comment. One was for Namaste Rock rezone. We had another for Reed Pendleton, the Willow Springs overnight accommodation, and another for the Daltonburg rezone. So all 3 of those, you will see our recommendations as they come to the commission. But I do want to say that there was a lot of engaging information coming from individuals. The commission is working super hard, and I think they're just doing a great job really evaluating these types of developments and or rezones. So that was pretty interesting. As Mark already mentioned, we continue to work on the Thompson Springs cleanup. And the other thing that I've spent a lot of time and effort in the last week is the water district out there. And these are things that eventually I think we need to look at as a county. Yes, it's a small community, fairly exclusive from the county, but they have very limited resources. And I think it's something we're gonna have to look at. And maybe when we get to the CIB monies, I might ask Sarah a question about whether Thompson Springs, that water study could encompass, or sorry, the Grand County water study would encompass Thompson Springs. But I think it's really imperative as we look into the future that we really know our water resources, and specifically Thompson, in the sense that their water resources are right now just springs that appear to be slowly drying up. And so we really need to understand the capabilities of development out in those communities, but also in our community. And that's it, Mary.
Thank you very much, Trish. Sarah.
Well, we had the 3 special meetings last week, which we all attended, on UTV noise. And then I attended 2 different meetings about the CIB prioritization, as well as about how to apply for CIB grants. Nothing much to report here right now.
Thank you, Sarah. Evan?
Yeah, I attended a meeting of the Arches Special Service District regarding the water treatment on the north side of the river. There's some upgrades that are coming down the pipe there. And just a reminder, that is still currently privately held. And so the district is working on transitioning that, the actual assets and the physical building titles to the district. One of the things we're running into is currently the district has no budget. They don't spend any money, and any kind of like agreements and such, it would make sense to have it go through legal review. And so just trying to figure out the best way to do that. If the sellers, it's basically going to be sold for $1, but if the district needs that review to happen independently, then there's some more finagling of finances that would need to happen. So luckily,
Evan, have they try the Employees Council or the district. Have them get a hold of Evan Clapper. There are, for districts and such, I don't mean Evan Clapper, Evan Terrell, that you can get so many hours of free legal service. We've
Okay.
used the Solid Waste Special Service District.
Yeah, so I imagine the sellers will draft any kind of agreements, and then we'll kind of try to get it moved forward as much as possible. But that's good feedback. Yeah. But with those upgrades, there is a permit that will need to be issued from the state, and the state has already expressed that they're only interested in issuing that to the service district and not the private holders. So that's good in my mind. It's kind of putting a deadline on the horizon, and so that should be coming down the pipe. I also met with the cemetery district. Those guys are doing great. Things are moving along. There's been some improvements out to Sunset, Memorial Gardens. They still haven't started the regular irrigation process for the summer. So, but watering will probably come online in the next month. And then, as well as those other special meetings, I attended the sound testing demonstration with Gabriel and Sarah as well. So that was, I appreciate all those that put effort into making that happen, with especially Cliff's efforts and volunteers from the Motorized Trail Committee and just other citizens who came to demo and see and test their individual machines. So it was much appreciated. And that's all I got.
Thank you, Evan. Kevin?
Sorry, I'm snacking. I'm out my mouth. So in addition to the special meetings that other people have mentioned, I sat in on a meeting with Elaine Gisler and Loves Communications about designing some fancy survey work. I forget the official name for it, but it's, just trying to better understand the reason, the sort of people who visit here and why they visit and things like that. And I just, in general, it was impressive. I didn't know much about Loves Communications before getting on the commission, but they seem very competent in these things. And I'm also impressed with all the data gathering things that Elaine has been putting into place, and hopefully those will begin to translate into things that help us make decisions in the future. Additionally, I sat in briefly on a meeting of some of the Dark Sky group, and you may recall that a few years ago we passed a Dark Night Skies ordinance, and it gave businesses and residents 5 years to comply with the new lighting rules. And a lot of those 5 years has already gone by. And so this meeting was focused on how to sort of ease that transition so that we don't, start panicking, 2 months before the deadline. So hopefully they will be giving presentations to the commission in the near future about public education campaigns, maybe incentive programs, subsidies for people who might have financial difficulty, revamping their lighting, that sort of thing. And that's it.
Thank you, Kevin. Jacques?
Right, on the 8th, I attended a Motorized Trail Committee meeting. The main focus of that was, we had Lori Simonson, the city attorney, attended and gave us a preview of what she's working on with the city noise ordinance. And we had a discussion of that, as well as a discussion of our county noise ordinances there. And then on the 13th, I had a trail mix meeting where we had a lively discussion about making the paved bike path north of town legal and friendly towards e-bikes. And that's a discussion that we're going to continue at the next meeting. And that's something, as far as future considerations, will once Trail Mix gives that its blessing or not, then we'll bring it up with the whole commission. The OSTA meeting on that same day was canceled. And other than the previously mentioned special meetings, that's all I have.
Thank you. Gabriel?
Yeah, we had the first meeting for the Economic Diversification Advisory Council. We decided that we're going to be meeting monthly for the first 6 months here rather than quarterly, so we can kind of sort of get our feet on the ground as a group and sort of create some action plans and come together a little bit more. Met with Canyonlands Healthcare Special Service District. Not too much to update there. I participated in a roundtable discussion with City Council Person Kaylin Jones and former Commissioner Kurt Wells on KZMU. That was just some interesting broad discussion. And then, yeah, lots of energy put into towards all of our special meetings, including the noise demonstration that Evan referred to. That was yesterday. And that's all I have to report today.
Thank you. Thank you very much. On Thursday the 8th, I went to Blanding to participate in a meeting with the Interior Secretary Howland with other state, national, county, and city elected officials. She came to listen, and that's what she did. She really listened well. And I expressed our support of Bears Ears and returning it to its original size. On the 9th, I met with Ben Winslow from Fox 13 to discuss Grand County's mask ordinance and why we continue to keep it in place, and because of being a tourist town. And although we are small and have very little infrastructure as far as healthcare, we could be in a crisis very quickly. So we kept our mask ordinance. Then, like everybody else, I attended those 3 meetings concerning noise in our community. As on the 13th, I also had the privilege of going and being with the governor and lieutenant governor and other elected officials for the signing of the Utah Raptor State Park bill. It was very fun, very exciting. Got to see some amazing bones and eggs and different things that they have uncovered at Dalton Wells in that quarry and around there. It was really fascinating. There was one section that there were like just huge amounts of fragments, not just fragments, but bones. So it is a very valuable area. It was really exciting, and I got to talk and communicate with a lot of people about our enthusiasm and our thoughts on how we want the park to look. I had lost my place. On the 19th, yesterday, I went to on a special field trip with head state paleontologist and geologist and other public officials and many people from the Park Service. It was, I learned a lot. It was really exciting. It was fun to get up on top and view the area and discuss the lines have not been officially drawn to the size of the park and where it's going to end and where it's going to meet, but they're getting closer. There might be a section added to the park that are in the park that's across Highway 191. And when you look across and you see all the very green and purple and such rocks, those are also quarries. So they're considering incorporating them in the park as well. So that was very fun, very exciting. I learned a lot, found lots of bones. There's lots of dinosaur bones just laying around. I left them there. I have a couple future considerations. I got a letter from Grant Davis for a future consideration. I don't have any way of reaching him, didn't give up, but it was a very polite letter wanting us to do like the city is in putting ads in the paper that it's illegal to have people permanently living in RVs on your property. He said that it's unfair to neighbors of these to increase the density, which creates noise, dogs, and other such issues. So for a future consideration, I would like to address his concerns. I got this yesterday. I noticed that Arches National Park put out a press release today. I think it would be good for us to read the press release and give a formal response to it. So I will be working to draft a letter and getting people's input. So those are two future considerations. So that's the end of my report. Thank you. We are to elected official reports. Quinn?
Sorry, I was typing. We're going up through the audit right now, so I'm pretty dug in. That's really all I've done for the last 2 weeks is deal with the audit. Oh, and the meetings last week, of course.
Oh, yes, you had a busy week. Thank you for your hard work. Christina, are you on yet? You have a lot on the meeting.
On.
Do you have any?
I'll just say, obviously I've been working a ton on noise. But Matt Brooks, our chief deputy, has notified us he's leaving the county May 6th. We're all very, very sad. He was a perfect fit really for the county. His family is up north, and so he's taken a job with City of Orem to be closer to them. So that job is posted, spread the word, and hopefully it doesn't clog up my office too much, but there'll probably be additional delays through the summer until we get a new prosecutor up to speed.
I'm really sorry to hear that, Christine. I'm really sorry to hear that.
Me too.
I don't see any other elected officials on the meeting, so we'll hear from the commission administrator and then the associate administrator. Chris?
Thanks, Mary. So besides just working on agenda items, I've been working with the hospital to finalize their bond. We're going to be ready to do the closing end, at least from Grand County's perspective, on May 18th. So that seems to be going all right. And also working on doing a lot of due diligence for our parcels that we may consider putting up for sale. We've got a appraisal going on right now. And then there's quite a bit of process involved in the government selling property. It's not a ton, but I mean, there's statutes that govern how we have to do it. So I'm researching all that. And maybe by the next meeting, we'll be able to have a session to discuss strategy for selling those parcels. And so the potential uses. And so anyway, working on that. And I'll turn it over to Mallory. She's got some good updates as well. Mallory?
Yeah, I have a few things, some exciting things. First up, I will talk about staff. Tim Higgs, our weed department supervisor, is retiring at the end of the month after 31 years with the county.
Wow.
Very impressive. He's done a lot. We will miss Tim. Appreciate all that he's done. And ahead of his retirement, we did have interviews this week, and we hope to have a decision and something wrapped up, hopefully by Friday. So thank you, Tim, if you're listening, for all of your hard work and years of service. Along those lines, we are also very excited to announce that we've hired a planning and zoning director. His name is John Gunther, and he is going to be joining us from Canada. John has many, many, many certifications. He could write a book on planning and zoning. In fact, he wrote a book on technical writing for planning. So I think we're going to be in great hands. He's already jumping in, and I have some exciting things to share that he's looking at. I know, Trish, you spoke about water, and he is already looking into an RFP to start with some kind of long-term planning that really focuses on the water and land piece. So I think we're going to be in good hands, and we hope to have something out finalized also with the associate planner this week. We kind of got held up in that process and decided to just focus on the director really quickly. So John will be here on the 31st of May, and yeah, I'm excited for the great
Oh,
things.
soon.
No, of May, sorry.
That's not bad.
Yes, and the other exciting thing I will share is I just got off the phone with the Indigent Defense Commission, one of their grant specialists, and we're working very hard on getting everything taken care of to hopefully be approved for a managing PD office. It's been a process, and I did have the opportunity to speak with folks from surrounding counties. I think it is kind of scary in some ways, but I'm glad that Grand County will hopefully be a part of this round. I think that there's a lot of concern or excitement, skepticism around what is to come and what could be potentially implemented and required at the state level, but I think it's exciting to be getting ahead of that. If it is something that will come down statewide, I think it will be to our advantage to really be proactive and to already have gone through our kind of trial and error with that. So very exciting. The next step is, I believe on Thursday, they're going to let us know roughly what funding was approved, even though we haven't done the formal application. I will kind of guide the process. So exciting things all around, and I'm excited to see what is coming for us all. That's all that I have, unless there's any questions.
Wow, Mallory, thank you. You've been working hard. Thank you. Okay, we are to department reports, and we do not have a department report at this time. So we are moving on to general business action items. Approving Armstrong's Professional Service Agreement Task Order N, snow removal equipment. Andy Sosvig.
Good afternoon, everybody, County Commission, members of staff, public. I'm Andy Solzvig, Airport Director. What I have in front of you is a professional services agreement, task order N, in amount of $20,410. This is, I guess, part two of the snow removal equipment grant. There's actually two different grants. So if you recall, in a previous meeting, we approved the snow removal equipment building. For those of you who were able to go on the tour, you notice that the structure that we have is full with equipment. We don't like having equipment stored outside. It can wear down a lot faster for a useful life. And the FAA likes to have snow removal equipment stored indoors. With that being said, the grant will fund 100% of the project, both the building and the equipment purchase. And then once we have the structure, we'll have the equipment to fill it. What we're looking at purchasing is a loader with a broom attachment. And for perspective, the nice thing about getting a loader rather than just a specific broom for snow removal is that we can use it year round for other purposes. But the broom itself, we're looking at probably about a 16-foot broom. These are not like your typical things that you would see on the street. And the reason why that is helpful to us for snow removal is we have 3 trucks with plows right now. And if we get anything less than maybe 3/4 of an inch or 1/2 inch, they don't do much for snow removal. In fact, it kind of greases up or flattens the snow and sometimes makes it even more slick. Whereas when you have these large brooms, you can get to the surface and remove it. A plow on a truck is about 8 feet. And if we get a 16-foot broom, that means we're doing twice the amount of space in half the time. And we can rely on less staffing needs, or one person can complete the process in a quicker time. So one thing I didn't mention last time was about like snow. We have had 2 seasons that were just not a normal year. But one thing we need to understand as well is the reason for this is there's a requirement by FAR Part 139 airport operations that we need to have the runway clear within a certain period of time. For our case, it's within 60 minutes. And so when it starts, we need to have that runway cleared and opened within 60 minutes or continuously monitor. So having this large piece of equipment is going to be very beneficial to the long-term operation. A couple other details. Again, this is for our agreement with Armstrong for them to do the behind the scenes work, the procurement, all of the grant paperwork associated with it. And you can read in the scope of work any more details that you would like to find out, but I'm happy to entertain any questions.
Questions from the commission? Seem thorough. Yes, Kevin?
I move to approve the professional services agreement task order N with Armstrong Consultants for $20,410 and allow the chair to assign any related documents.
Thank you, Kevin. Do I have a second?
Second that.
Thank you, Jacques. Discussion? Seeing none, I call for a vote. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now you're still up, Andy, approving FAA agreement for flight service operations as it relates to the runway Blue Hills Road project.
Okay, once again, Andy Solzvig, Airport Director. This is a different type of agreement with the Federal Aviation Administration. There are different departments within the FAA, and this is their, I guess, their flight operations group. And what they need to do is when we move or relocate a navigational aid for aircraft doing approaches onto the runway, of which we will be doing on our Blue Hills Road project, they need to check and actually fly the approach to make sure that it's meeting the degrees and within performance and all of that. So what this is for is it's a reimbursable agreement where we need to pay them up front. Then when they schedule it and actually do the flight checks, then they come back with us with the final bill. It might be less, it might be a little bit more. It is all grant refundable. We just need to, and I've dealt with this with a different project before. We just need to pay them in advance and then go from there. So be happy to entertain any questions on it.
Questions?
So Andy, hold on, this is Chris. You said we have to pay in advance. So you're talking about the $17,510?
Correct.
And where are we going to pay that from?
Through the airport budget in one of the line items. We'll find it. Like I said, it is 100% grant refundable. So let me figure out the budget detail on that and where we're going to pull it from. Plus, I do want to work with you on budget amendment stuff, but that's for a future discussion.
So this is a payment to DOT.
Correct. Department of Transportation, right?
Okay.
They had originally wanted to schedule in August. Now it looks like it's going to be possibly early December, but the project should be wrapping up, I think, end of October, early November anyway. So it might work out okay.
All right. And when will that be due?
I will check with them and coordinate with you. So we have a little bit of time. I think as long as they have the funds, we'll sign the agreement and then work on getting them the funds. So I can figure out where we'll pull those funds from.
All right.
Chris, for the person making the motion, should they mention that upon determining where the funds will come from? Or do we have to should we mention something like that? Or do you think that's necessary?
You know, I budget, there's a separate fund for airport capital projects. I mean, it doesn't really have any revenue beside grant revenue. And so when you spend money out of it before any grant reimbursement comes in, you're running that fund into the red, which is technically illegal. And so I think, we can cover it, but it's not a straightforward thing. It just straight, because we would establish an account for these grants in Fund 56, which is our airport fund. And, I tried to make it relatively clear to Armstrong and all the contractors that we need to get our grant reimbursement in before we can pay on invoices, especially with these big multi-million-dollar projects. We can't cover it. We don't have the cash in the bank to cover $3 million projects waiting for the FAA reimbursement to come in. This isn't, that bad, but I'm just saying that due to the way that fund functions, it doesn't just have extra money laying around. It's not like the general fund or other funds. And so we might have to cover it some other way. I'll just have to think about it. I'm sure we can cover it until we get reimbursed, but I'm just saying it's not as straightforward as trying to cover an expense in the general fund where there's a balance of unrestricted revenue that we can use.
So Chris, the motion as written doesn't really specify which fund it's coming out of. So could we just pass the motion and then figuring out the line items is something you can do with Andy? Is that?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
If I may, Madam Chair,
Yes.
This was an unexpected cost as a part of that project. We were not aware we needed to pay anything up front for the flight checks. So this is what they need just for us to get on their calendar. They need this agreement, and then they can schedule it. It's just, yeah, unfortunate a little bit.
Yes, Kevin.
I wanted to make a motion.
Thank you.
I move to approve the non-federal reimbursable agreement with the Department of Transportation Federal Aviation Administration in an amount of $17,510.58 for the commissioning of a flight inspection on runway 3 at Canyonlands Regional Airport, and for the chair to sign any documents related to this agreement.
Thank you, Kevin. Kevin made the motion. Do I have a second? It's seconded by Evan. Any further discussion?
And I
Yes.
just want to make sure that Chris will speak up if he thinks the motion needs to be changed.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay. Any other discussion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Aye. Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you all.
Thank you. We are now to approving volunteer appointment to the library board. High school representative, Tricia Dean.
Can you hear me, Mary?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So at the end of March, the library board unanimously voted to have Lillian Scott be our high school representative. She will be a volunteer board member, non-voting. She is a Castle Valley resident, a Honor Society student. She is on the USERV Council, and she is a prolific reader, which is quite unusual nowadays. So I would highly recommend that the commission authorize that she be a part of the library board.
Do you want to make a motion? Do you want to make a motion,
I'll
Trish?
make.
Okay.
Sure. I move to approve the appointment of Lillian Scott to serve on the library board as the high school representative. Her term will begin April 20th, 2021 and expire December 31st, 2022.
Motion by Trish,
I'll
seconded by Sarah. Thank you. Any further discussion?
I'm just glad that she's getting on the board because I saw her application in January.
So yeah, that's exciting. Okay, any further discussion? All in favor of the motion? All opposed? Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Approving volunteer appointment to the Weed Control Board. Sarah.
This is a pretty simple action item. One of our weed board members is leaving the county. He was the BLM representative on the weed board, and so now we would like to put Charlie Fisher, who is the fuels specialist for the BLM, onto the weed board, and it just really helps to have federal agency representation on the weed board because there's so much federal land in Grand County.
Thank you. Want to make a motion?
Sure. I move to approve the volunteer appointment of Charlie Fisher to serve on the weed board with the term ending December 31st, 2023.
Thank you, Sarah. Do I have a second? Seconded by Jacques. Discussion? I'll call for a vote. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Approving fiscal year 2022 Community Impact Fund Board CIB priority list for the government entities within the Grand County. Mallory.
Yeah, so I put myself on this, but Chris probably has some things to add. We did send out that list this afternoon, and this is the list. You previously approved one in February, and that was the list we had to submit just with every project on it. And then, as you may recall, after the meeting, we went through the process and you all gave a rating to it, which we averaged to come up with a ranked list for the commission's priorities. Sarah attended the meeting last week, and then after that, what they did was send out a link for folks to vote, and then this is based on the votes that they got, their average priorities. So it is a little deceptive where it says county priorities. So what I tried to do when I sent out the list later this afternoon with what those priorities were that you all identified, I titled it Commission Priorities, and maybe that will help going forward to kind of make it clear. When they say county priorities, those are all entities that vote on it, and then there's the commission priorities that you all came up with. And yeah, unfortunately, this is kind of the next step, and it's something you all sign off on, but not necessarily reflective of the priorities. Chris, do you want to add to that?
Well, I forwarded a little email conversation to y'all with Michael Bryant. I mean, it's a little confusing to me because it's not how I'm used to doing it from when I was on the council. And I understand, why the CIB would want to see a prioritization that sort of averages all the entities in Grand County out. And so that part, is understandable. But, obviously realizing that the outcome of that is not the same as the way that the commission itself prioritized the projects. And then there's the regional element too, which includes the 7-County Infrastructure Coalition project. So, I mean, I sometimes get the feeling like the ALG wants us to just rubber stamp this. I don't think that that's necessarily what you have to do.
So Chris, who are these other entities who contributed to the final ranking?
They're all listed in that third column.
Okay.
So Moab Valley Fire, Thompson Springs Water District, Moab City. Well, I guess it would depend on if they all submitted. They all had the opportunity to submit their rankings the same as we did. And I haven't really looked over the back end of this to know which ones did, but it would be these individual entities in the entity column.
And then each entity submits a ranked list, or each entity?
Yeah, so they do it more or less the same as we did. So they'll all rank the projects in their order of priority. Mm-hmm. Same as we did. And then the ALG takes those and averages them out again to come up with this.
But in particular, then it sounds like we have the fire district is weighing on in whether we should put, stormwater mitigation above hospital or vice versa,
Yeah.
which seems kind of bizarre since that's far out of their area of expertise.
Yeah, and I mean, we're ranking other entities, you know, and it's out of our expertise too, some of these things.
Well, but
So,
I think we are the, no offense to the fire department, but I think we outrank them somehow.
well, I guess that's maybe, you know, what I'm getting at is in the past, you know, there's kind of been multiple lists, and I guess there's an attempt to consolidate it down in a fair manner. And, you know, I don't know, the CIB generally doesn't operate based on these rankings anyway, and oftentimes the entities don't either. You know, when a project's ready to go and the entity prioritizes the application, that's the real priority. And then when it gets to the CIB, you know, it's kind of a political process to get something approved. And so there's that whole other aspect of it too. The most important thing is that if anybody has a potential CIB project, that it be on the list. That's the most important thing. The priorities themselves, you know, I don't know how much the CIB board really cares about them, quite honestly. They kind of take applications as they come in and evaluate them using process and criteria. But it is a requirement that a project be on the list in order to even apply.
I'd also just like to point out that we didn't have any say over that regional project that's listed, which is the 7-county infrastructure rail line study. That wasn't, Grand County or any of our entities weren't given any option to prioritize that or comment on it or anything. It's just.
It's an odd process.
I guess I was also confused because that railway, it doesn't intersect Grand County as proposed, does it?
No, not that I'm aware of, but it's regional.
But in what sense is it our region, just that we're kind of close to it? So even though we're not part of the 7-county infrastructure coalition.
There are 2 railways proposed. One is the Uinta Basin Railway, which has received massive amounts of CIB grants in the past years, $30 million of straight up grants with no matching funds. And then also there's a vague proposal to do a rail study of southeastern Utah, which would involve bringing rail down to San Juan County, which inevitably might involve Grand County.
Okay.
Actually, so yeah, looking back at Michael Bryant's email, he says CIB requires any project traversing a county's boundaries beyond that county's list. So, you know, the 7-county infrastructure coalition has a long history of not coordinating or informing or communicating with Grand County. And, you know, I don't think we've had any official communication or request from them about this at all. And so, you know, it's typical, unfortunately, but, you know, I don't know that the commission should feel compelled to approve it. I just want to make that point. I don't think that we're forced to approve this list as the ALB presents it.
So you said there may be no consequences to how the rankings are on the list. Are there any real world effects of us approving or not approving it?
Well, sure. I mean, you'll probably upset the CIB and the 7-county infrastructure coalition.
I don't think it would serve us to not. I mean, it's an odd process, but like Chris says, in the years I've been on the commission, it's who gets their application ready that goes forward.
When I was, oh, sorry, Mary.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say also that in that meeting, I went to the how to apply to the CIB meeting, and the staff of the CIB really stressed that the CIB doesn't actually have that much money anymore, and that it's mostly going to be loans that are given out. And I just want to tell that to the public. Also, with the information that the CIB has in the past granted huge amounts of money to the 7-county infrastructure coalition. So I don't know, this is this ongoing issue and CIB has been criticized for it, but I don't know if us not approving the priority rankings for our county is going to do anything about it.
Yeah,
I think it's not going to do anything.
there's two separate subjects here. One is, the ranking of entities within the county, and then the second would be the 7-county infrastructure coalition's item. And I don't know how you feel about somebody proposing a project in your county without even talking to you about it, but it doesn't sit well with me.
So do you see an option where we approve our county's priority rankings with the exception of the regional project, which we've heard nothing about?
Yeah.
Or is that just poking the bear? I mean, is that just getting?
Well, I think it puts them on notice that if they want our acquiescence to a project in our county, that they need to communicate with us,
Okay. I agree with, yeah, okay.
And maybe
I agree with.
it would be something that's not, that we wouldn't be opposed, but it's hard to know, like, what's the rail line for? What's the intention of it? Nobody's ever given us any information about that. So, to me, it's just difficult for me to recommend that we would approve a project in our county that we don't understand the intention of or the logistics about, or I don't know. It just seems like a bit of a faux pas to me.
It does. It does.
I guess I'd be willing to make a motion.
Thank you, Sarah.
I move to approve the fiscal year 2022 Community Impact Fund Board prioritization project list for the governmental entities with Grand County, with the exception that we don't want to improve the regional project that we know nothing about. Is that enough?
Yeah, well, let's call it the Southeast Utah Rail Line Study, to be more specific.
With the Southeast Utah Rail Line Study.
Until we have further information.
Okay, I accept.
Okay, motion by Sarah. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jacques. Any further discussion?
Can I just ask? Oh,
yeah,
can I ask?
Go ahead. What Trish is probably going to talk about. Just to give a little background on the water study.
Perfect.
I put that on several years ago, and I'm not sure what the status is with anybody who's working on with USGS and Moab Area Watershed Partnership and the city's conservation committee or whatever. But this was intended to be originally was a follow-up on the water study and the water budget. So the water study sort of tried to quantify all the inputs to our system, and then give us a kind of a total safe yield. And that's very broad, but you can't get any more detailed than that unless you do a mathematical hydrological study where you attempt to model the way that the groundwater flows, model climate effect of climate change, and those types of things. And so that was the original intention of that study, was to build upon our water study that gave us a budget, a safe yield budget, and to establish a mathematical model for how our water moves, how much we can expect over time given various climate scenarios. And it would also be helpful with regard to trying to figure out the effects of developing a new water resource on adjacent systems. Like, what would happen if you drilled a well, and what effect would that have on adjacent wells? GWSSA or the city of Moab, or private wells, etc. So anyway, I mean, I suppose, I don't really know. Like I said, I haven't talked to anybody about that in a long time. But
no, it's really cool, and I think it's it's desperately needed. I was just interested, you know, it says in there Moab and Grand County. Is it really just concentrated on our valley, or does it extend out at all? And I'm just asking that because Thompson, we're talking about.
Originally, it was only to build upon the area of study for the water study, which included Castle Valley and the western slope of the LaSalle's. And so that was the area in study, and this would build upon that. And so, you know, like for instance, with Thompson, what we need to do is a version of the study that we've already done for Castle Valley and the western slope of the LaSalle's, which would be that basic analysis of inputs.
Okay.
Determine a safe field water budget. And I'm assuming that they're just, you know, artisan fed. Do they do any pumping? Do they have wells, or is it all artisan?
No. Yep. And so, yeah, that and similar, you know, they have some resources to Green River, but, you know, they have no infrastructure for that. So, I mean, I think that's the goal, is just to really understand what they have and what their development capabilities are. But it's great to know, like, if we could get an initial component done, then maybe we can jump on board if we receive those CIB monies, obviously.
So, I mean, I suppose at this point in time, we still have the ability to amend this because we're voting on it right now and it's on the agenda. So, I don't know if we wanted to add a separate step in. I mean, obviously, it would be tough to reprioritize if we added in, unless we put it on the very bottom. But like I say, the most important thing is that it's just on the list, because then it gives them the ability to apply, where they can't apply at all if it's not on the list. But, you know, I don't know how much it would cost or anything like that. So that's, you know, it'd have to be determine figures.
Right. And we're seeking out other resources. So I guess I'm not too concerned about that. We're moving on in other, you know, avenues. It's just, it would be cool, like, if you guys eventually do get that money, if we've had an initial study done that, you know, the mathematical modeling could apply to Thompson if we have some initial data.
Well, how about this, Trish? So they're already on there for capital infrastructure and improvements.
Yep.
How about if we just add in capital infrastructure studies and improvements? Just add studies to that line.
That sounds great. Yeah, if you guys are okay with that, that'd be great.
That'd be probably easier.
Okay.
Do you want?
So do I have to make
Sarah or whoever?
You go, Sarah.
I move to amend my previous motion to include the changes that Trish just outlined, which is to add the word study to the Thompson, what is it? The Thompson Springs Water District capital infrastructure studies and improvements.
Thank you. I'll second that amendment.
But I think we have to vote on that amendment.
So I'm ready
You're
to
muted,
vote.
Mary.
Sorry. Okay, well, I will. So we have a amended motion, moved by Sarah, seconded by Trish. Is there any further discussion? All in favor of the amended motion, raise your hand, say aye. Anyone opposed? The amended motion passes. That, since it passed, Chris, we don't have to vote on the first motion, we're correct?
No, you do, because it was an amendment as opposed to a substitute. So.
Yeah, and I guess I had further questions about the main motion.
Excuse me, Kevin?
I had further questions about the main motion, so yeah.
Go ahead, if you want, Kevin.
So I guess I'm still a little bit confused or maybe disturbed about just, you know, the overall process. I'm still not clear about what it means for us to approve this list. You know, we send them a list of projects and then they send us back the same list of projects with some numbers that we may or may not approve of. So that just seems a little strange to me. And I think the process by which this overall ranking was arrived at it seems flawed to me in two different ways. One is just the intention that, anybody applying gets to weigh in on prioritizations of other entities' projects, even if you're a relatively small entity. And then just combine, I don't know, in the email exchange that you sent, Chris, they didn't explain how they combined those different, are they just averaging rankings, or are they doing
That's how they've done it in the past. I was planning on attending the meeting that Sarah went to, but a citizen came in and I had to deal with a citizen with some issues, and so wasn't able to attend the meeting. But in the past, everybody ranked them top to bottom, however many projects there are. So in this case, there's 24. Everybody present at the meeting would rank them. All the entities present would rank them, and then in the meeting, the ALG staffer would crunch the numbers. He would basically just average them all, each line. It's kind of the same way that we did. And the end result would be that average of all the different entities' rankings. And I'm just assuming that that's the way they did it this time as well. But Sarah, did they give any indication that that's how they did things?
Yeah, they sent out the email. They didn't do it at the meeting, where each entity could submit one response and rank the projects, and then I think it was averaged. But I agree with Kevin, the process seems really flawed, because it would automatically float projects that and maybe this is the intention, it would float projects where like Grand County and Moab have some projects that are in alignment with each other, so that floats those projects to the top, whereas like Castle Valley, all of their projects are listed pretty much at the bottom. They're an entity out there. Nobody was at the meeting to speak on behalf of their projects either. So, yeah. But I don't know, that's what it is. Michael Bryant from SULAG was also saying that the priority doesn't seem to really matter. He's not sure why the staff request it.
Okay.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the staff requests it, and I guess the board goes along with it, but the board on a regular basis says that they don't care about the rankings. They're for the use of the local entity. So I don't know. It's always been confusing to me, and it just kind of feels like they're just trying to get it done without any significant thought about how the process could be better. I've expressed a lot of frustration with it myself, and I know that it probably comes across when I communicate with the ALG, but so I don't know if it's much ado about nothing to nitpick it, because it doesn't seem to have any real world effect. But I agree, it's not the greatest process.
Okay, so the last thing I'll say about that issue then is that maybe we could just write a letter to the CIB, describing our problems with this process and requesting that they either scrap the ratings if they're not that important, or determine the ratings via a more rational process.
Okay, any further discussion? So since we voted unanimously for the amendment, now we vote for
the amended main motion.
Okay, we are now voting on the main motion that did not include the study for Thompson Springs. All in favor of the main?
Hold on, that's not right, Mary. We're voting on the main motion as amended to include.
Oh, okay. Okay. I got really confused. I'm sorry.
To illustrate the difference, I voted for the amendment because I like sticking it in there, but I'm going to vote against the main motion just to send the message. So.
Yeah, so just so we're clear, Sarah's motion was to add the word study in county, in what's on here is the third one, Thompson Springs Water District. Under the project description, it's going to add studies under capital infrastructure, comma, studies, comma, and improvement.
Okay. So we are voting on the original amendment, motion with the amendment. Correct? Okay. All in favor of the original amendment with the motion with the amendment, say aye or raise your hand. All opposed? Passes for 6-1 with Kevin voting in opposition. We are now to item J. Repealing Title 11 noise of the Grand County General Ordinance and related ordinance number 602 and adopting a new title 11 noise pollution. Christina Sloan.
Okay, what I'd like to do is start with a presentation. We continue to get comments from both sides up to this very minute. We just got one. And I feel like comments on both sides still include a lot of misunderstanding. And one thing we haven't done in all of the many, many meetings and the many hours is back up and talk about some of the basics. I want to do that and then move to the new noise ordinance. So I'm going to share my screen. Everyone can see that. Kevin Walker driving his Kawasaki Teryx down Main Street, his favorite ATV. You can see, because you know he's such a detailed man, how clean his ATV is. I think that'll surprise anyone. So noise pollution, we had a public comment. Noise pollution is pollution. I think it's important, and we are proposing retitling our Title 11 to be noise pollution. It is a public health and safety issue. There is a ton of data out there. Our proposed ordinance does include numerous sites. There's a lot more out there as well if you want to dig deeper. But noise pollution has been shown to cause higher, as much as 25% higher incidence of anxiety, depression, high blood pressure, atrial fibrillation, heart disease, stroke, stress, and sleep disturbance, which causes all sorts of other issues. And the stakes are high. This is out of our proposed ordinance, which discusses the purposes of the ordinance. It's about both balancing our economy and also our residential areas, our residential public health. So our economy, of course, is world-class. It's comprised of many users. It is comprised of motorized users. It is comprised of non-motorized users. We have spent, a year now and thousands of county hours collectively trying to strike a balance that's both legal and reasonable, non-discriminatory, and considers all of these users in mind. At the same time, the commission and the planning commission too has made it really clear that our primary goal here is to protect our residential areas and this small valley you can see that's surrounded by red rock that causes reverberations in our residential areas on our county roads. We have gotten massive public comments since October 2020. We've gotten 466 emails and letters. That does not include petitions, and that does not include oral comment. 337 of those were asking the commission to regulate noise in ATVs, most of which strongly so. 322 of those were residents and 15 were visitors. The majority of those visitors included some strong language, such as, they're not coming back unless we get a handle on the noise, or they're not going to spend their money here, that type of language. On the flip side, we got 129 emails and letters asking the commission not to regulate noise or otherwise opposing noise regulation. 16 of those were residents and 113 visitors. You also heard similar comments from these folks in opposition that, hey, they feel under attack and they don't plan to come back. That, they're an ATV user that spends money here and they don't plan to come back. If you add in the petitions, we have heard from thousands of people. I think it's up to about 3,000 folks who are asking for noise regulation. These folks being from Moab, Utah, and across the country. And those thousands have been received since October 2020 in 2 main petitions. Oh dear, okay. So the stakes are high, but so are the noise levels. This data, which we talked about with our noise expert, I'm going to go through it a little differently today, but shows us a few things. And this is based on EPA federal data. One, it tells
Can
us,
you make your chart bigger by any chance, Christina?
I don't know that I can. I don't think I can because I'm in a presentation. So that doesn't help, does it?
Mary, I think there's a way under the view options for you to enlarge it just on your screen if you need to.
Yeah, if you go back to that other screen and click on view.
Me?
Yeah, go to view, click on view, and then go to zoom. And then go, I don't know what it is right now. Click on 100% and see what happens. Go to 200%. 100% is where you already were. There we go. That's going to be bigger. Well, no.
And I need it on present mode because it.
Oh, okay, it looks the same.
Okay, sorry. Hopefully, maybe Mary, you can zoom in on your end. It looks like I went past, let's see. Okay, so the EPA, through a series of tests, and they're squishing all this data together, have determined that, and this is motorcycles and ATVs, that meet the federal standard for motorcycles. And there's a federal standard for three-wheeled ATVs, but not four-wheel. And this is 80 dBA and 82 dBA, depending on which vehicle it is equivalent to 1 or 2 semi-truck. So all of these measurements are semi-trucks that are also regulated by federal law. And they've determined, so all of the federal regulations for motorcycles and ATVs are required to meet. It's a different test, and it's not a safe test for us to do roadside because it's full throttle. But the EPA has determined that a safe noise level is in this 80 to 82 dBA, equivalent to 1 to 2 large trucks. Now, that safe level, the safe area is outlined here in pink. So that, according to the Fed, according to the EPA noise office, it would be these ATVs and motorcycles that would be deemed safe, and certainly safe for residential areas. But we are looking, of course, at the stationary test that's down here. And the stationary test is safe roadside, which is why we're considering it and not the EPA test. And we're looking at a range between 90 and 96, based on what other jurisdictions are doing, based on what the Motorized Trail Committee has opined, based on recommendations from the noise expert, and of course, based on our own testing levels. But you can see that if we allow all the way up to 96, we're starting to allow noise that's the equivalent of 50 trucks, a fleet of semis. However, and this information is coming out of the most comprehensive noise study to date, which is a 2005 noise study made by the state of California. And that study showed that all ATVs and motorcycles that meet the EPA test, the federal regulation, can meet a 92 dBA standard under a 20-inch stationary test, which is very important. Data is cruxy here. So now this green box shows the range that if we go up to 92 dBA under our stationary test for motorcycles and ATVs, it shows the range under the EPA test that we're going to be subjecting our community to. And it is up to 8 large trucks. But if we allow that range to go all the way to 96, which the Motorized Trail Committee is recommending, and along with UTV groups, then we're subjecting the community up to 50 trucks. And we've done, numerous noise testing events now, and what you can see is, the stationary test and the drive-by, the actual noise can be quite different. It's hard to correlate them. But what we do know from this study is we'd be subjecting the community to a much higher level of noise if we go beyond 92 dBA. This is the same data prepared in a different way from the same California noise study. And what it shows us is that the average 20-inch noise level of vehicles which pass the EPA test is 86 dBA. That's way down here. So essentially, and there are a couple of dots under this X, what it shows us is that the federal regulations, you know, are on the low side of options out there. At the same time, again, anyone that can meet the EPA test can meet that 92 dBA test. Okay, so we know that noise is bad for public health. We know that noise pollution is pollution, which is heavily regulated across the country. We know that EPA has determined that trucks and street motorcycles and three-wheeled ATVs in particular that produce more than 80 dBA at 50 feet are bad for health under the EPA tests. We know that motorcycles and ATVs make as much noise as 1 to 2 large trucks and are louder than other passenger cars and trucks. And anecdotally, every resident of the county has their own experience with that. And we know that the average is 86 dBA. So problem solved. You know, why can't we start here? And I know when we started this process, the community and the commission was hoping we would be down there, but we can't be down there. We are constrained. It is not that easy because of law and politics. So we have a matrix of state laws that do constrain us, but the number one state law we have to keep in mind is this one. It's actually in the Off-Highway Vehicle Act. It's 4122 10.5, and it's subsection 2 that's our concern. A county may not prohibit or restrict the use of a street legal all-terrain vehicle on a street or highway. Of course, we've heard a lot of talk about that. The other thing that is really hard for folks to at least come to terms with is that under longstanding legal principles, the county cannot do indirectly via regulation what we can't do directly under statute. So we can't regulate in a way that effectively prohibits ATVs from the streets. So where does that leave us? It leaves us unable to respond to the majority of citizen comments. So, you know, up to this week, we still are getting numerous public comments asking us to do these 5 things. Institute an ATV curfew, institute an ATV permit system, start requiring trailers of the public, set the dBA standard as quiet as a passenger car, and designate residential routes for ATVs. We cannot do any of them under state law unless we get statutory changes out of the Utah legislature to these ATV laws. Of course, the city did try hard with State Bill 168 to pass a curfew bill, and the Utah legislature voted that down even after it was whittled away to the hours of 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. So the frustration is real for a whole lot of the community. Our hands are effectively tied in a lot of ways. But there are some things we can do. This is what we can do. We can set a reasonable dBA level consistent with federal regulations that vehicles can meet. We can require reasonable modifications to comply. We can treat vehicles differently based on a variety of factors and these various tests. We can require lower operational sound pressure levels at night. That's only under the drive-by test, not the stationary test, which is an equipment test. We can incentivize industry to make quiet vehicles, and we can enforce our noise regulations. So how do we determine a reasonable dBA level for various vehicle types? And this is what we have put massive amounts of time into. Well, we can look at existing noise studies. Again, the 2005 is the most comprehensive to date. We can research industry data. Chrissy Hoffine in my office spent a lot of time doing this, and certainly in consultation with Motorized Trails Committee, there's essentially nothing public that the industry releases. There is no such thing as a stock dBA level for ATVs, for example. We can review other jurisdictions' noise ordinances, and we have done that. We've spent a lot of time doing that. However, you know, we have to keep in mind that there are various regulatory purposes for every single community. Every single community is different. So what's working somewhere else doesn't mean it's going to work here. What protects communities along, say, a federal highway or a big trucking plant is very different than what we have going on here. We can and have consulted with our noise expert, local ATV businesses, and the county's Motorized Trail Committee, and we've conducted numerous noise demos. We've held 3 events, and huge thanks to Cliff Kuntz and the Motorized Trail Committee and all the volunteers for all the effort they've put into those. We've spent about 50 collective county hours on noise testing, including drive-by noise testing and also some general community land use oriented noise testing. Here's some pictures of that noise testing. We now have our type 1 meter. This is what Chris is holding here. This is Cliff's type 2 meter. So we were also at our most recent 3-hour testing event comparing the readings between the two, which were substantially similar. And we didn't just test ATVs. We tested all sorts of bikes. We tested vehicles. We tested Jeeps. We tested ATVs. We tested trucks. So in Q1 2021, these are all the different vehicles that we've tested, including diesel trucks, large pickups. One modified Mustang. It's quite loud. Let's see. I'm going to play just 3 video clips. They're all quite short of different testing. I have 2 drive-by testing procedures you're going to see and 1 stationary. That was the Ford Mustang. We did drive-by testing at 15 miles per hour, 25 miles per hour, 35 miles per hour, also at acceleration and stationary tests. This was one of our early ATV testing events. 25 miles per hour. How did I make it stop? This one I think will play. This is a stationary test. The stationary test needs about 5 seconds at a consistent half throttle with the RPMs. We typically were using a tripod here, which is how law enforcement would do it. But you can see why it's not safe for law enforcement to do this by themselves. You do have to be behind the vehicle or set up your device and walk away remotely. So our takeaways: vehicles, including ATVs and motorcycles, can currently meet the 92 dBA at 20-inch standard under the stationary test with current stock and modestly priced muffler options. ATVs cannot currently meet stationary test standard lower than 92 dBA, and we don't know when the industry might be able to provide that. Speed matters. Nearly all vehicles tested, including ATVs and motorcycles, can meet the 80 dBA at 25 feet. The drive-by test when driving respectfully and slowly. We have gotten a lot of positive comments that the speed limits in town are working. 100% of motorcycles tested that did not have the EPA stamp required under federal regulation fail the 20-inch standard at 92 and the 80 dBA standard at 25 feet. Regarding speed, this is a graphic provided by the noise expert that shows how different vehicles, the dBA increases as speed accelerates. They're not all the same. A is automobile, MC is motorcycle, MT is medium truck, B is bus, and HT is heavy truck. So you'll see, for example, the B line is much flatter, whereas the motorcycle line is much sharper. The noise expert, we don't know precisely where an ATV falls. This is the type of data that we will collect in the next year and reassess. But we expect the ATV to be more along this sharp line like a motorcycle with increasing speed. So the lower the speed, the lower the noise. And I think the majority of folks are hearing that around town. Regarding testing, you've heard talk of 3 different tests. So there's an EPA test. This is a full throttle acceleration test done in the safety of a lab. It is not safe for roadside testing, and we will not be doing it. It's not safe for the vehicle either, because it can cause damage to a motor if not done correctly. The stationary test is an equipment test. So it is testing only the noise emitted from the exhaust system, and the noise meter is placed 20 inches from the tailpipe. The groovy thing about it is it's a standardized test created by the industry that can be and is being used to efficiently prosecute noise violations. It's a half throttle equipment test, so there isn't danger to the engine, but it doesn't measure total noise. So it's not going to measure the drivetrain, the gearbox, or the tires. So it's not necessarily related to the noise impact to the community, and there can be variations between the stationary and the operational test. But as of now, it's the best tool we have to proceed to a citation when we're ready for that aspect of our noise enforcement. The operational test is a drive-by test, and it does measure the total noise, including the drivetrain, the gearbox, and the tires. And it's the best test for evaluating the impact to the community. However, so far, the operational test is done by measurement procedures that are adopted by the community, and none of those have been adopted into case law by any states, which means we would need an expert in every single case in court, which requires massive amounts of money. It might be our future, and that just might be an appropriation we need to make. And at some point, there will be a case that proceeds to whether it's our Supreme Court or another state Supreme Court. Case law will be made. The procedure will become standardized in that way, just like you see with the intoxilizer procedure was created by the Washington State Supreme Court and then integrated into all the different states via case law. We got to wait for that to efficiently use the operational tests in prosecution. It also requires isolation of the vehicle being tested. It is possible to do as a vehicle just drives by on a road, but the most efficient use of it is going to be at an intersection. And so you're not going to be testing vehicles at speed anyway. So it does have limitations. The enforcement plan that we've discussed a few times, year one will be soft enforcement. Our focus will be education, providing warnings only, no citations except for egregious violations. Engage the industry. We really haven't had much time to do that yet, although we have, the industry has engaged us a little bit, and mostly has let us know that the industry doesn't support street legal laws because ATVs weren't made to be street legal. And also invite more state legislators down to both witness the noise testing, witness how these vehicles operate in the real world, drive these residential routes. I think that's really important. The city of Moab did some good work on this last fall, and I think we need to continue to make those invitations to our state legislators. And then, of course, data collection will be a very important component of our year one enforcement plan, and in conjunction with Moab City Police, so that we have a big set of data to work with to reevaluate the effectiveness of the noise pollution ordinances in 1 year. I do recommend the commission hire our noise expert to help the city PD and the Grand County Sheriff's Office create that data management plan. And then we're going to hold some voluntary noise testing events for locals and visitors. This will be free and voluntary. The plan for now is to do one May 29th, Sand Flats Recreation Area. And then year two will be where we start to implement the noise ordinance, which may have been tweaked at that point, depending on our reevaluation. We certainly will continue education and data collection, but we will start to move towards citations in addition to warnings at the officer's discretion, just like any traffic stop, and continue to hold noise testing events. So given all that, we end up with our noise pollution ordinance. Tables 1 and 2 are really the meaty parts of the provision that we're going to focus on next when we look through the ordinance. The conclusion is the proposed noise pollution ordinance integrates a year of study, research, data collection, and consultation by county staff and electeds, strikes a balance between protecting public health and preserving motorized uses that are woven into Moab's historical fabric. It's legal and it's non-discriminatory. It's supported by a reasonable enforcement plan and a commitment to reevaluate its provisions within a year, and results from a public directive from the Utah legislature to pass and enforce effective noise regulations before we ask again for an ATV curfew or residential route designation. So we're here. We've been asked to come here after a whole lot of work. Okay, now I'm going to focus on the noise ordinance. Hopefully this looks bigger for you, Mary. And I'm going to focus on things that have changed since the last version, and then I'll take questions from where you guys might want to focus if we need to workshop anything. The language in yellow that I'll discuss is all new. This is our purpose section. All I've done here is add the new sentences from Title V that discuss protecting and preserving our residential areas as well as our economy. We have a couple new definitions of highway motorcycle and on-highway motorcycle, and these come straight from federal regulation 40 CFR 205. These are, after the noise testing event yesterday, these are my recommendations. We haven't changed our 92 dBA for ATVs. I can take or leave, this amortized dBA into the future, but we've certainly heard from the Motorized Trails Committee that we don't have any idea if that's realistic. So I show it as struck through for that reason. I've increased the pounds of the vehicles and also increased the maximum sound pressure level. It was stated before it had a 6,000 pound limit and an 88 dBA level, but increasing that after seeing yesterday that, you can have allowed dBA emissions under the stationary test, but a quiet drive-by test. And also appreciating that from the 6,000 to 10,000 pound category, those are going to be medium-sized trucks that we were not including. I've reverted back to our original language proposed in consultation with our noise ordinance that does not set a dBA level for motorcycles. Instead, it requires the EPA stamp and that alone. The EPA stamp is already required for every single motorcycle product. That is every type of motorcycle, and that is new or aftermarket. We did test one motorcycle yesterday, a street motorcycle that did not have an EPA stamp. They had aftermarket mufflers, which still should have the EPA stamp, but they don't. They are illegal, and they did fail both the drive-by and the dBA test. We also tested a closed competition bike, and the EPA stamps that we're proposing are only for on-highway vehicles, which is an 80 dBA at 50 feet under the EPA stamp or EPA test requirement, and an off-road, which is the 82 dBA at 50 feet under the EPA test. The closed comp bike also failed all the tests, and there are modifications possible, and it can be modified to be street legal, but the modifications would only bring it down 2 to 4 dBA, which still did not allow it to pass the EPA test, the stationary test, or the drive-by test. So I don't think we need to encourage those bikes on our streets, and that is my recommendation. And then we've just increased the poundage back to 10,000 to be consistent. This drive-by test is used in a variety of jurisdictions around the country. And it will certainly be something we should reevaluate within the 1 year to see if it works. I was tipped off that electric vehicles do not have spark arresters or mufflers, or don't necessarily need them. So I've included an exception for electric vehicles here. And this is the specs about the EPA stamps that are required. So those are all the changes. The red, of course, is revisions that are different from our existing Title 11, and we've talked through those a good bit. So I could leave this up, or I can stop sharing and take questions.
So Christina, did you send this in, or is this the first we're seeing these recent changes?
I sent this, and I sent 2 recent versions. So I think you've seen everything here.
Yes.
Okay. The packet that I'm seeing does the packet that's online have the changes outlined in yellow?
No.
It doesn't have the purpose. Let's see. Oh, it doesn't.
So yeah, I don't think that we got into the packet the stuff that you outlined in yellow.
That may be. I did send it to the commission. I also sent it to Cliff, and Cliff sent it to the Motorized Trail Committee and all our ATV businesses. So there's at least been some broad dissemination.
All right. So anyway, I was just trying to point out that what's in the packet is not the same as what Christina's got on the screen. And I think it's mostly the yellow outline that appears to be different.
And
I just went through are the changes I made after the noise demo yesterday.
And it was, yes, this was taken out the years, the lowering of the decibels,
Mhm.
and that's not in our packet. But are the commissioners, do they feel like they're familiarized with the changes? Does anyone feel uncomfortable with the changes or needs more clarification? So the reason you took out changing the decibels per year, going down each year is because they were unrealistic, or that
Well, we haven't engaged industry yet, so we don't know if they're realistic, and no one knows. So the Motorized Trail Committee couldn't help me. Our noise expert couldn't help me. In addition, and there's a lot that goes into this. So you'll see the ATVs, the testing procedure is a different test than vehicles. And those are different. The throttles are different. And even though this test is testing the exhaust system there, you can get a little bit more vehicle noise. So in an interest of just sticking with 92 and it feeling fair, even though it's actually more complicated than that, that's another reason why I'm proposing to eliminate this. We can certainly leave it in there as a nod to industry with what we'd like to see, knowing that we're going to reevaluate it within a year. But I'm just making a proposal. You guys get to decide.
So Chrissy, what was the origin of the amortized thing?
I made it up. It was
Okay,
not
it was
a
your idea
recommendation
originally.
from the noise expert, but he did support it.
Okay. And then another question, I guess this is the first time I realize you're proposing to eliminate the stationary test altogether for motorcycles. And what about someone who's got an EPA stamp, but the muffler is just not functioning correctly? Maybe something broke internally, so it's a very loud motorcycle. So I guess I'm just wondering, does it really why not just leave DBA, 92 DBA for everybody in the proposal, including motorcycles?
So part of any ordinance is what is reasonable for law enforcement and for prosecution, and what's reasonable in the real world. And what's reasonable in the real world is that law enforcement is going to see an EPA stamp and he's going to say, you're good to go. And quite frankly, that probably includes the closed competition stamp as well. The closed competition stamp, it basically means you don't have to, the EPA's looked at this and it doesn't comply with the 80 or the 82, but you can use it in these closed competition cycles. But the reality is law enforcement's going to see a stamp there, and you got to bend over and look for these things, and some are blocked and some are going to be dirty, and the stamp's going to be enough. And we can't attempt to catch every violator here. I don't want to put that burden on law enforcement. The other issue is that there are two different SAE tests that are applied to motorcycles. And again, we're just getting into more complications. So now we're asking law enforcement, it would be 3 total tests. Off-road would be the J1287 test. You'd have vehicles at J1492, and then you'd have street bikes at 2825. And again, it's an additional test and additional complication for law enforcement for probably very little to zero increased enforcement effect. And the stamp is required by federal law. So why not leave it there? Why are we incentivizing by creating this loophole for people like the street bike that we tested for an individual to buy an illegal muffler when there are millions of muffler products out there that are legal? I mean, all of them should be. I mean, by federal law, every single one has
Clear,
a
I wasn't suggesting that you drop the EPA stamp. I was just saying that in addition, they also need to pass a stationary test, and the intention will be to catch mufflers that aren't functioning. There were legal mufflers when they're purchased; they don't work anymore. And if the vehicle is well over a stationary threshold.
That is your right to add that in, but I don't recommend it.
Chrissy,
for
can
the
you
purpose
scroll
of-
to the language of the stamp? I guess one of the things that we have to realize is the closed course EPA stamp is only intended to regulate closed course racing. Has nothing at all to do with on highway use. And you can't legally drive one of those vehicles on any federal property because it doesn't have a spark arrestor. And it has no bearing whatsoever on highway use. It's so, you know, I thought, you know, we kind of discussed this, but to me, accepting a closed course EPA stamp is because they don't regulate them for noise at all. There's no limit to how loud a motorcycle designed to be in a race can be.
And so, Chris, is this part B of what we're looking at that you're talking about? The off-hard?
Well, I don't know. I mean, Christina and I discussed it, and then it's changed again.
It's changing again. So A is the street bike test level, 80 dBA at 50 feet. This is the EPA test. And B is the off-road motorcycle, not competition, 82 dBA at 50 feet. So if they have either one of those stamps, they'd be good to go. If they have a closed competition stamp and they're on our streets, then they would be cited.
Okay.
And
All right.
Cliff, you know, Cliff's argument, Motorized Trail Committee argument, is that you do see a lot of closed competition bikes that have been modified to be street legal on our streets. You know, they're not made to drive on streets, and there was an admission that they're not comfortable to drive on streets. And so I'm hopeful that there really actually aren't that many on our streets. But even if they're modified to be street legal, what the Motorized Trail Committee is telling us is that you can do muffler and end cap modifications that drop the noise 2 to 4 dBA, but that's still above any of the testing limits we're talking about. So they're just not appropriate for the street.
So I guess I wanted to, you know, when evaluating these noise ordinances, you know, one thing we want to think about is the effect on people with, you know, borderline noisy vehicles. But the other thing we want to think about is, you know, is this going to make our neighborhoods quiet or not? And so I was just going to give my understanding about how effective, you know, these different levels are and where we might want to take them in the future. So I think, you know, my impression based on some of these demonstrations that Cliff gave is that if you're at 91 dB on a stationary test for UTV, that's still rather loud. And if we just have roads full of things that are just barely below that threshold, that, you know, isn't by itself going to do it. And I think some of the charts Christina showed earlier bear that out. And then I guess I've heard conflicting information about the drive-by test, you know, the 80 decibels at 25 feet. You know, there's some online studies that suggest that that's a relatively strict standard, but my understanding is the test that Chris and others have done with our noise meter makes it seem kind of easy to pass. So it's looking, you know, so possibly that's also not by itself going to make our streets quiet. So the conclusion I draw, and if you think this is wrong, let me know, but, you know, these initial levels, which are, you know, defensible politically because other, you know, they're tracking regulations that other entities have used. They might, you know, there's no guarantee that this is going to make our streets quieter. We'll just have to evaluate. And I guess I'm hopeful that, you know, this data that we're collecting in the future, some of the data will be, are vehicles that pass these tests, are they quiet enough, or are they still excessively loud? And if they are excessively loud, then I think we should consider the next time we revise the ordinance, dropping some of these dB levels. So.
Does
I have a
anyone
quick
else have any-
question.
Yeah.
I just had a quick question actually to bounce back at Kevin. And I guess, do you have any ideas specifically on how we might actually sort of empirically assess whether the streets are getting, you know, when you say the neighborhood's getting quieter? You know, it seems like we rely on a lot of anecdotal information, which, you know, is obviously effective in its own way. But I wonder if we can sort of, you know, if we go ahead and implement some of these, you know, and some of this enforcement and are collecting data, you know, based on the stops that might be made and some of the educational efforts, I wonder what else we might do to be able to create some sort of assessment about, you know, what the effect in the community might be.
Well, if you're looking for more objective standards, I mean, one easy thing is just to see what percentage of vehicles are affected by these. Are we capturing the noisiest 1% of vehicles with these noise thresholds, or is it the noisiest 10%? And I think the difference there is pretty significant. But I do think, ultimately noise is a somewhat subjective. I mean, we can measure it with a decibel meter, but what that is a subjective judgment. And, we just sort of average what a lot of people think and arrive at that.
Our sound meter allows us to take readings over a period of time. We'd have to do it in a way where we can protect our very expensive noise meters, but we could have someone sit at a corner, every Saturday morning in the fall, spring and fall during our busy seasons, and for a 6-hour plot that same intersection, or maybe we pick 3 of them, and where our noise meter can just sit there and plot for us over a 6-hour period what's going on. And if we can find some manpower to have someone do that, I think it's a great idea to do some of our own long term. And it can go up to a week, but obviously I don't know how we protect a sound meter for a week, but it would be great to even get something like that going.
So that kind of brings up a point maybe to, with the drive-by test, I'd say if you set up at a corner where there's a stop sign, you're probably going to get up to 10 dB louder results than if you set up where people are just cruising along, driving by. Because when any vehicle is accelerating, it's a lot louder than it is when it's just moving along at a constant speed. So, that's just the reality of it. It's a complication, but it seems to me like if you're going to do drive-by tests, you kind of have to standardize the type of location that you're going to do and the circumstances, because they're going to be considerably different depending on whether or not you're at a intersection or in the middle of, just a straightaway. And in the straightaways, most of the vehicles pass. Only the very loudest will be over 80 dB. But I'll bet if you moved up to a stop sign, then a lot more would fail.
But the situation isn't so different from enforcing speed limits. I mean, if you ask what's the safe speed to drive on a highway, that probably depends on how many other cars are there, how curvy is the road, lots of things. But at the end of the day, we just decide on some uniform speed limit, which, probably is too restrictive on some circumstances and some in others. So I think that, the thing you point out that, decelerating, accelerating, that's a common theme with law enforcement. And I think another good analogy, with enforcing speed limits is there is a lot of discretion for the people enforcing it. I think Christina pointed it out in her talk. So I think, to sort of fine tune these laws, that they're doing as good as possible at catching the people we want to catch and not catching people we shouldn't catch, we're going to have to rely on discretion of law enforcement officers.
Now, Gabriel, your question was more, how are we going to know if it's working? Did I understand your question?
Yeah, and I think what, kind of the idea that Christina proposed might offer valuable information, and it might not, but it could be worth looking into, implementing something like that.
It would be nice to have some type of data to help us rather than just arbitrarily. But we can look at how we can do that later. That wouldn't be part of this discussion, I don't think. I found it really quite amazing to see how many letters, although I've known how many, we all know we've been inundated, but the difference between in-town and out-of-town responses was pretty dramatic. And we are representing our community. So I want to keep in the year changes. Even if we end up changing them next year, I would like to really send a strong message to the manufacturers to do whatever they can to make these machines quieter, because the problem is the noise, not the people that are driving, it's the noise. And even If we find later that it's not meetable and it's unrealistic, we can change it, but I would like to send a strong message. So that's my personal, I'd like to keep the yearly changes in.
Mary,
Otherwise, I was fine with your changes. Yes, Evan, Kevin?
I don't know if I'm the only one, but I'm hearing a lot of echoey feedback when you talk.
Me?
Yeah, as
Well-
if you had a phone nearby that was also.
Well, I was trying to use my, I'll take that out. Is it better without my?
Yeah, that's better.
I think, Mary, you probably had two microphones going when you had that. One on your computer and one on your headset.
Okay, whatever. Okay, so anyway.
One other question I had with regard to the change in the gross vehicle weight rating, so that everyone's aware, 10,000 is like right in the middle of the pack for 1-ton trucks. So about half of 1-ton trucks are going to be a little bit under 10,000 and about half are going to be a little over. I don't know if you're wanting to regulate 1-ton trucks. I mean, this is more specific to like Power Strokes or diesels, but it's right smack in the middle, kind of statistically, of the 1-ton trucks.
And how would we determine the 10,000 pounds, the door sticker that has the gross vehicle weight on it, or?
Yeah, the door sticker should always have it on there. But I don't know if you're wanting to just do the intention was to capture like medium duty trucks, but 10,000 is kind of right smack in the middle of the like 3500 series Dodge, Chevy, and F-350 Power Stroke range. Like mine's older, so it would be 10 under 10,000. It's 9,990 or something like that. And then the newer ones are like 10,100. But just to bring it up, that it's a kind of an awkward number because it splits the 1-ton weight class.
So
And
one
the
advantage.
Motorized Trail Committee's recommendation is to go up to 14,000 pounds and 95 dBA in that line
Well,
item.
14,000 pounds is well above any consumer pickup truck. Even dual wheel drive only goes up to about 12,000. So now you'd be getting into like commercial trucks if you went all the way up to 14,000. But Les made the point that he didn't know what the stock dBA levels are for 1-ton diesel trucks, and we don't know if they're capable of even passing this standard stock.
So one advantage of 10,000 pounds is it's commonly used in lots of other noise ordinances, so it makes us not stand out from the crowd.
Well, just to be aware, though, like I say, it's an awkward number because it's right in the middle of the 1-ton truck class.
What would you recommend, Chris? What would you think would be put it in the middle, but not bring in commercial?
If you're interested in governing all consumer pickup trucks up to dual wheel rear wheel drive, I mean, it's gonna be like 12,000 is what most dual rear wheel drive diesel trucks are at. I haven't done a lot of research, but I think if you get much beyond that, you're talking like the real commercial trucks. I mean, you do have to realize also that in order to haul more than one UTV, you need a pretty big, powerful truck, and they're pretty loud when they're hauling heavy loads. I just hauled like 14,000 pound load with my truck, and it's a lot louder when you're hauling a heavy load. I don't know how loud. I didn't check it, but I'm afraid to. I don't think it would pass when you're hauling, like near the max. But that most companies, if they're going to be trailering UTVs, they're going to have a diesel, and hauling 3 UTVs is probably going to tap out their towing capacity legally. But it puts you in that turbo diesel mode that's, probably 2,500 to 3,000 RPM, and they redline at 4.
Well, we don't have the data for sort of the large, medium trucks. And Les doesn't have the data either. I've talked with him about this a couple times. And his recommendation is to leave it there, collect data, and reassess it.
To leave it at 10 or to leave it below?
He can go from 6 to 10, but he can appreciate that, that does leave out a chunk of medium trucks if you cap it at 6. He also felt, we talked about some specific medium trucks like the Tundra, the 150, the 250 Ford I'm talking about. He felt good that all those are going to pass, but he really didn't know about, the various larger diesel trucks and stuff. He didn't have that data at his fingertips.
Well, since we're starting out planning on just giving warning tickets anyway, I think we've got plenty of time to adjust these levels in the future if we find that it's not operating as intended. So I don't think we need to be super cautious and conservative in setting these initial levels, given that initially we're just going to be giving warning tickets anyway.
Yeah, I'd like to say that I don't think it's our intention to limit people's ability to use their work trucks in town. And if our ordinance seems like that it is resulting in that, then we can change it.
Well, I can tell you right now for sure that about half of the 1-ton trucks are going to be under, and about half are going to be over. I just looked up different years on the internet. It's pretty clear that 10,000 is right in the middle of the range for 1-ton trucks.
So I wonder whether we should do a series of straw polls on some of these individual issues. So the one would be, raising 10,000 to 12,000 or something. And I think there's a few others that have been discussed. Is that the way to move forward on this conversation?
We could do that. I could keep track.
I mean, I have a Dodge Dually 1-ton red truck that weighs curb weight is 5,000 to 6,000 pounds.
Yeah, so curb weight and gross vehicle weight rating are two different things.
Oh, okay.
So gross vehicle weight rating would be how much your truck can carry, including its own weight. And so dual rear wheel drive is going to typically be like 11 to 12,000. Single rear wheel drive is going to be around 10 if it's a diesel. So yeah, the curb weight's different. That's just the weight of the vehicle with nothing in it. But gross vehicle weight rating is how much it can carry. It's more of a suspension rating than anything. You can put a loud diesel in an F-150 too. But the gross vehicle weight rating is a suspension rating. It's not a motor rating. And if you leave it at, you are going to end up regulating work trucks if you do 10,000, but not all of them.
So some of the issues, Mary, if you're making a list of things to try to do relatively quick straw polls on.
Yes.
There's this question of weight for the truck. We could raise it to 12,000, as I think Chris was suggesting, or we could lower it. I don't know, to 8 or 6 to exclude that class of trucks, or we could leave it at 10.
Just to be clear, if you want my recommendation, it would be to leave out the 1-ton trucks.
What?
Your recommendation is
to leave out the 1-ton trucks. Set it at a gross vehicle weight rating that's more the consumer level truck, like the F-250 and lower. The 1-ton trucks.
Okay.
I don't know. I could look up what that number is, but the 1-ton trucks are really the work trucks. Those are the trucks that almost all of the contractors are going to be driving around, the utility companies, the county roads department.
Okay, well, at the moment, I'm just trying to make a list. So there's that issue. There's the issue you brought up, Mary, of the amortization, which is in the packet, but has been deleted in Christina's proposed draft.
What did you call that?
Amortization, I think people were calling it that, but just, lower dB levels for newer UTVs to give people an incentive to. So that was Chrissy's idea to put it in there, and also her idea to take it out later. There's the question of, should motorcycles along, just like all the other vehicle types, have to pass a stationary test of 92 dB, so make that more uniform, and this is leaving in the EPA stamp, and that was also in something similar to that was in the initial draft. Actually, the initial draft had it 90 rather than 92.
Okay. Okay.
What else am I
By the
leaving?
way, I just looked up the Tundra and the F-150, and 8,000 the gross vehicle weight would capture both of those. They're at about 7,850 on the outside.
And my 3/4 ton Dodge, different one, not a dually, is 8,800. So that's a work truck that would be 8,800.
Okay.
My question is, as far as enforcement of a truck, of a modified truck that has a muffler cutout or a bypass, could that be, in terms of this process, like, is that without any sort of testing, without any sort of stationary testing, could that be sort of subjectively enforced and cited? Because that's mainly what I'm concerned about, because I hear a lot from motorized recreation community and from the community at large that is talking about noise, is that a big factor in this whole noise problem is, are a lot of these sort of modified trucks that are just really, and I can speak personally, they're the ones that really make me jump and lose, fall off my feet when they drive behind me and I don't know they're driving there. So I'm just wondering how we're potentially addressing that.
Yep, so that's already prohibited by state law anyway, but it is included in here. So section 11.06.010 motor vehicle regulations says general regulations. And the language mirrors almost exactly state law. So it does prohibit muffler cutouts, bypasses, or similar devices. And it also prohibits equipping, maintaining, or operating a vehicle in a way that causes excessive or unusual noise, which of course is defined in the ordinance.
So a sheriff deputy is trained to recognize when those modifications and issue a warning and or citation upon visual recognition of it?
Right, they would be. And, we'll be getting our officers trained up with the noise meter company, but another service that Les provides is that type of training. And he would come here, the noise expert, and train our officers, which I also recommend. Next step. And the sheriff, I know, I haven't talked with Brett, but the sheriff is very open to that and would love to work with an expert that can help them.
Okay, thank you.
So are we ready to try to efficiently discuss these issues that we just listed?
Yes, I think we are. Let's do the weight. It seems like the most complicated one to come up with what we finally land on the time. So let's do a straw poll on lowering the DV levels yearly to send a message to the manufacturers.
We just have
keep that in.
Can we have a brief discussion before the actual voting?
Yeah.
And I guess I want to say, I kind of like the idea that it's but I do think it's a little bit envelope pushing in terms, we don't want to be perceived as having a wacky, unreasonable noise ordinance. And I just worry that maybe, so I guess I'm agreeing with, Chrissy's most recent recommendation on that maybe it's better not to have it in it. We can always add it in later if we like, but it's kind of unusual. So that for me, that makes me lean toward taking it out.
I would agree. I think it's more likely to be counterproductive, honestly.
Are you, so you're weighing in, no, don't leave it in. And Kevin, you want to keep, I'll say Chris, the latest. That's the way the latest proposal. And so does Gabe. He wants to keep in the latest proposal.
I'll concur with Gabe and Kevin as well, just mostly for simplicity's sake and keeping it even.
Sarah?
I like the idea of incentivizing the industry in some way. That seems like a good way, but the maybe time scale on it seems a little fast, so I like it.
Evan? So you're yes, keep the old one. Evan?
I'm okay with leaving it out.
Trish?
Trish is having connection problems. She might be coming on right now. Trish, are you available? You want to ask the question again, Mary? I think she just joined.
Trish, we're wondering what we're getting a straw poll on right now is whether or not the latest version that takes the yearly changes out and just keeps it at 92. Is that would you like the new one, or would you prefer to incentivize the industry?
I will stick with the new one, just static at 92. Thank you.
Okay. And I vote, so it looks like there's 5 people want to keep the new one and 2 people would like to keep the old one. So it looks like let's keep the new one.
Okay, and also just to clarify on the first line, it'll also just say ATVs because I hadn't actually struck through that. I'm going to go back through what we decide at the end. I'll screen share, but just FYI.
Okay. Okay, motorcycles, should they have the same DBD levels? Discussion.
So I'm in favor of that. And an additional reason, which I didn't mention earlier, is one of the talking points I've heard most frequently, especially talking to say legislators, the first thing they say is, enforce your noise ordinance, which is what we're doing. But the other thing they say is don't discriminate against UTVs. Dirt bikes are also noisy. And I think if you're trying to find the closest analog to an ATV, it is these dirt bikes. They're similar loudness. They serve similar purposes. So if we're imposing a stationary test on one and not the other, that to me that just isn't. It looks bad. I know that there's a reason because there's these EPA stamps, which in theory measure the same thing, but I just don't really see the harm in making it more uniform. And I think it fits in with this other suggestion of taking the limits for other types of vehicles and just making it 92 across the board, which sort of sweeps a lot of complexity under the rug because the relationship between stationary tests and drive-by tests is different for different vehicle types, but it does make our ordinance sound simpler and it makes it sound more fair and more uniform.
Jacques?
I tend to agree with Kevin on that. I like the uniformity of it. That speaks to me. So I'll agree with Kevin.
Okay. Sarah?
Yes. I like the 92 decibel limit.
Gabriel? Trish?
Yeah, I like the 92 also. And the reality is, like motorcycles, if they don't comply, they're pretty easy to trailer. They're pretty move around.
Yeah, they're easier to trailer than a UTV. Evan?
And sorry, this was about if the EPA sticker would make them exempt?
No, that they have the same DBD level as at 92, keeping 92 dB level for all motorized vehicles. Don't make something different for the motorcycle.
Well, okay, just to clarify, we are preempted by federal law. So if they have the EPA stamp, they can't be tested unless there is evidence that the muffler is not functioning, and the EPA requirements do require that's an unmodified and functioning muffler So the way it will be written is 92 dBA, if that's your number that you want, 92 dBA, except that anyone who has these two stamps is still exempt. And just so you know, the test that we would have to use for street motorcycles is very problematic, and I'm not sure we could do 92 dBA. So all of this goes into why I've recommended against that. Also, of our 6.
I'm sorry, Christina, I got just a little confused. Right? You recommended against changing the DBA level for motorcycles. Is that what you said?
I recommend against including a DBA level. I'm recommending we require only the EPA stamp, which is federal law. And if there's, 1 in 55 bikes that are stopped that doesn't appear to have a functioning muffler, maybe that's part of our data collection and we revisit it, but the test is problematic legally for me. Don't really want to discuss why. And for street bikes, and it's a third test law enforcement would have to learn. We're preempted by federal law anyway, and I don't think it would be effective at reducing noise. And if there's the muffler's gone or any of that stuff, that general language could work anyway. Cliff would also argue 92 is way too low because the total noise of a motorcycle is way less than a vehicle or an ATV. And so it's not putting a motorcycle on the same playing level. So it's not uniform. So this issue is actually really complicated. And I think that my recommendation is the simplest recommendation moving forward in our year 1.
I'm okay with not including a DBA if they meet the federal regulations.
I think the sticker.
Yeah. So I guess now we're saying, is the sticker enough? Correct?
Right. Is the sticker enough, or do you want to set a DBA limit in the event an officer is concerned that the muffler is not functioning?
I'm only concerned about the fact that we don't want to, or I've heard people don't want to cite based on the pass by test. But what if a motorcycle, it wouldn't be a problem if a motorcycle could be cited if they failed that pass by test and their muffler was clearly not working. I wouldn't be worried about not having a 20-inch test for the motorcycle. But since we can't do that, then I feel like it's more important to specify. But I totally hear that it's complicated with motorcycles and I don't understand all of the issues at play.
Gabriel, I need you to take over the meeting for a moment.
Okay, well, I think we were in the process, we had started a straw poll. And let's see, I'm trying to think. It seemed like we had gotten input from everyone on that particular item, and Evan was the only one who was interested in following Christina's recommendation. Does that sound right? Okay. So we wanted to take a straw poll on one of another item. Let's see, maybe these this truck the truck topic that we had been talking about. Yeah. So currently that's been changed from what's in the packet from 6,000 to 10,000 pounds. Chris's recommendation is that if we went back down to 6,000 pounds, then that would be a little bit more targeted based on information that we know in terms of what the stock capability of a lot of trucks are and sort of what a stock construction truck might reasonably sort of capture. And then I was able to clarify that some of the modifications that might make certain trucks the most obnoxious are already that's already in an infraction in its own right without this sort of a noise measurement or so I guess we should take a straw poll on sort of bringing it back down to what it is in the packet. Or going with the most recent revision that brought that up to 10,000 pounds. And then was there also a decibel adjustment there that you had presented, Christina?
As presented in this, it goes up to 92. And I think a third option would be 8,000 pounds. That would capture medium trucks like Tundras, Ford 150s, that kind of thing.
So one advantage of having it at 8,000 rather than 10,000 to exclude, this class of largest, more commercial trucks is that it makes it easier for us to lower that decibel level in the future, because I think those are fairly noisy vehicles. And I guess if they're proving to be a problem, we could just create a new category of 8,000 to 12,000 trucks with its own decibel level. I don't think we're ready to do that today, but that's certainly an option in the future. If we decide we do want to, regulate noise from that source as well. So I guess I like 8,000.
So with that recommendation, I like that too. Let's get a straw poll on how we feel about taking that to 8,000 pounds with a 92 decibel pressure rating. How do we all feel about that?
I'd like to ask Chris, does 8,000 pounds take care of most non-work trucks?
So newer trucks, about 2017, their gross vehicle weight ratings went way up above before. And so, but the minimum gross vehicle weight rating for a 1-ton truck is going to be around 9,000 pounds and probably even more. So if your limit was below 9,000, then you're leaving 1-ton trucks out altogether for sure. Although some newer F-250s go all the way up to 10,000, even though they're just a 3/4 ton. So there is some overlap I'm seeing. But if the intention were to try to say, we're not going to regulate 1-ton trucks right now, then 8,000 would certainly do it, and probably 9,000 would be okay also. 10,000 though is just a weird area because it crosses over into the 1-ton territory, but not entirely. And so it wouldn't be quite fair because some 1-ton truck owners would get regulated and some wouldn't. But 9,000 is definitely below any 1-ton truck's gross vehicle weight.
Okay. So maybe I've modified my suggestion to be 9,000 rather than 8,000. Is that okay?
That sounds good. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it seems like Trish, is that a thumbs up? Does that sound good? Okay. Well, seems like that's how we can revise that piece. Does anyone else, are there any other pieces that we need a straw poll on at this moment? Or any other?
I don't understand where we ended up with the motorcycles.
Sorry, yeah. Where we ended up was, just including them in the table, like in the earlier draft, but I think the earlier draft had 90 decibels, and instead that would be 92.
Okay, then my proposal, because I have a real issue with the street bike thing and I'm not going to enforce it, just so you guys know, it would be to split those out, and we could do the off-highway motorcycles under J1287 at the 92, and then street bikes would be the stamp only, because the 2825 test is an issue. That's my problem with it.
But couldn't we just choose not to enforce that test? I mean, there's also enforcement discretion here. So if there's a test that we don't
right, so I'm just saying, no, we can put it in this table, and I'm going to tell law enforcement don't test any street bikes because I don't like the 2825 test. I refuse to prosecute under it.
Should we revisit
if we
that?
want to talk about why, we need to go into closed session on that one.
Okay.
But Kevin knows why, because we did talk about it today.
Okay.
I mean, I don't have a strong feeling between those two options. I just think, I think we do have enforcement discretion, and if there's tests, we were already saying we don't like the drive-by test, and that's not going to get emphasis at first, so that wouldn't be unusual. But I do think there's an advantage to treating vehicles uniformly.
So what are you recommending? What you're recommending, Christina, that we, for street bikes, not off-road bikes, but street bikes, we just rely on the sticker, correct? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
And then off-road bikes, what did you say about those?
So that would have your 92 dBA, except where there's a stamp on a functioning non-modified muffler. So again, we're still preempted by federal law. If they have an EPA stamp on an unmodified functioning muffler, that's all they have to do. They would not be tested. It would only be those bikes that don't have the stamp or where the officer believes the muffler has been modified. So
and I hate, God, this is tough.
And so the earlier draft that was in the packet, that did not, that just specified J1287 for street bikes, is that?
Right, I didn't appreciate the different tests that were required and developed by the SAE.
Okay, but in terms of like federal regulation, do they make, because it seems like when I've read things, EBA, they're not making as many distinctions. So is this a distinction that SAE likes to make, or is it also reflected in federal law somewhere?
No, it's a difference in the tests.
And what was it that I hate to go back to this, but they're all starting to blend a little bit together. What was the motorized road? They wanted to have a 96 dB level for motorcycles, correct?
Correct. But we did test, well, we tested 4 dirt bikes yesterday. We've also tested 1 more previously. So of the 5 dirt bikes the county's tested with Cliff, 4 of the 5 met 92 dBA. In fact, most of those met 90 dBA. The only dirt bike that didn't meet 92 was the closed comp bike, and it was far above. It was 96 basically. And it possibly could be modified to get to 92, but not necessarily. And then we've only tested 2 on-highway motorcycles. Both of them tested close to 96 under the DBA. So even if you set it at 92, you know, we don't have data that supports that. And again, we're preempted by the federal stamp anyway. Les was really surprised. One of those street bikes was a BMW. He thinks there's actually a maintenance issue there. He doesn't think your typical BMW street bike with a well-maintained muffler is gonna emit 96 dBA of noise of the stationary test. So, you know, I can't know. The second street bike we tested had the illegal non-EPA compliant aftermarket mufflers on it.
Who attended the Motorized Trail Committee meeting? Did any commissioners attend that?
You mean yesterday's meeting or the last?
Well, when they were discussing this.
I attend the Motorized Trails Committee meeting.
When they were discussing this, was it pretty unanimous that they felt like that having a different DBA level for motorcycles, or was it kind of a split between, how did the motorized, explain to me how the motorized people felt, Jock?
So especially, we didn't discuss street bikes at all. It was more dirt bikes. And in general, the Motorized Trail Committee takes its cues from Cliff. While we discussed it, most of Cliff's opinion held with the entire group. And his opinion, as Christina mentioned, was to have a higher DBA rating for motorcycles. And we didn't get into street bikes at all. That didn't even come up.
I mean, it makes sense to me to have, like, given the fact that a motorcycle only has 2 wheels and it's not making all that drivetrain noise that UTVs do, having a 92 standard for motorcycles does seem like it puts motorcycles at a disadvantage to UTVs. And that's the argument Cliff is making, I think, simplified.
Maybe I'm confused, Christina, but it sounds like maybe you're saying that it's actually making it harder on motorcycles to remove the stationary test, because already in the old ordinance, it said if you fail the stationary test, but you have a sticker, you're good to go. Am I remembering that correctly?
Well, let me share my screen with this revised language that is similar to what y'all saw before. So my proposal, if y'all feel passionately about this alternative DBA, is to split off highway and on highway. We use J1287 for off highway. There'd be a 92, except if they have a stamp that complies with the off highway regs, which is 82 DBA. That's a 50-foot standard under the EPA test. Then they would be exempt. I suppose, though, this language does not address the issue of functioning and non-modified, so I would need to add that in. And then under this proposal, the stamp alone is what's going to govern a street motorcycle.
Okay, and the rationale is that the stamp, the thing that we're trying to test for with the stationary test is the same thing that the stamp is trying to do. Just, is the muffler good enough and there's not too much exhaust noise? So you
Right,
would
that's
argue.
why I think it's overly complicated on law enforcement. I quite frankly think law enforcement is going to look for a stamp and that's it. So I think it's overly complicated. We don't need it. This is baby step number one, but you guys are into it. So.
Well, I get, my main concern is just, how it would look to, say a state legislature reviewing our law and asking, is it being, fair to UTVs? And they see that these motorcycles exempt. But I guess
They're not, though. They're not exempt at all. They're the only class that are regulated by the EPA. So all we're doing is acknowledging a federal preemption issue and moving on. That's all we're doing. But I can appreciate all of this is complicated and it's hard for a lot of people to look at it.
I'm not sure other people don't understand. But in any case, what I was going to say is I'm feeling kind of neutral on this issue. And so given the fact that you feel strongly about it, I'm okay just to put it the way you had it a few minutes ago, that relying only on the stamps. I don't know how other people feel.
Yeah, Mary, we may want to redo that straw poll if people are, not feeling one way or the other. Are you down with that?
Yeah, yes, I'm just trying, this is a tough one. We can come back and change it. I think in some ways, I want to pass the ordinance tonight, but in some ways, I think this section might need some more work. But we can do that, correct? We can continue to work on it. And then later, if we find out that...
Well, a few months from now, we might know whether the stamp's good enough or whether is this class of motorcycles that have the stamp, but are still rather loud. And we would like to somehow, get them with a stationary test or something because their muffler isn't functioning properly. Maybe that's very rare. But I guess I'm fine putting it in Chrissy's most recent suggestion that she started the meeting with initially. And that's different from what I said a few minutes ago.
Yeah, I found Christina's argument compelling as well. I would be fine with sticking with her amended ordinance.
And what we're doing now is really gathering data. And if we find that this is an issue and this is a problem, then with our data, we could probably come back and really fine tune it, correct? Do you believe?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I keep talking about a 1-year reevaluation, but we can do it at any point. We probably should do it periodically as we get data dumps.
Yeah, I think as we get data, we should, start reviewing it. So yes, okay. It looks like Jacques wants to keep it as Christina's written, right?
Because she's written a lot of different things, so we should say.
I know, as the most recent
the
that we shared on the screen. The most recent shared on the screen.
The most recent shared on the screen was more like what I was advocating for a while.
It's the one that she shared in her presentation.
Yeah.
Okay. The presentation. So we know what we're voting on. This is important.
Well, and I do plan to go back through each of, the final that you'd be voting on after these straw polls.
Okay, are we done with the straw polls?
How many, I don't know. Jacques wants to keep the presentation one, Kevin, presentation one, or?
Yeah, I mean, I'm neutral, but I'll vote for the presentation one.
Sarah? Anyone opposed to keeping to the presentation? Looks like the straw poll is keeping it the way it was written in the presentation. And then we're gathering data is what we're doing now, so we can see if it works. Okay.
Okay, so by presentation, you mean the off highway and on highway? So the 92 for off highway, or you mean when the very first version where EPA stamp is all?
The very first version from today.
Okay.
The one you recommend, Christine.
Okay, got it.
That I don't think they had any idea when they told us we had to enforce our noise ordinance, how difficult even creating the noise ordinance was going to be. And we're not.
Try to enforce it.
Okay, do we have any more questions before I go through what I think is our final? Okay, let me then just screen share what I think is our final. One other thing I forgot to point out is that Chris did some noise metering of land uses. So table 3 is the land uses. It's measured at nearest property boundary to the emitting source. And we did bump these up a little bit from Les's recommendations. And of course, it also includes exemptions and even an exception request process. Okay, so.
Well, with that, just to explain a little, like just the volume of a normal conversation is 65 dBA. So this is 5 dBA less than the sound of a normal conversation. But we did we added an exemption specifically for the unamplified human voice. So that's kind of how we dealt with that. But just to realize, and I kind of brought this up in some emails with some, like I played acoustic music over at Christina Sloan's house and Sarah Stock's house. Pretty sure that, like a neighborhood jam session is going to be a violation of this.
What did it read before?
It was 55 before, which is 10 dBA below the volume of a normal conversation.
I mean, before we're revamping the ordinance.
There was no dBA standard before.
Right, okay.
So there was, a prohibition of unusual noise. But these tables are entirely new, and dBA standards are entirely new to this entire noise ordinance. So I don't know. I mean, maybe it won't be an issue, but I just want to bring it up, that 60 dBA is, if you were speaking with somebody, you'd have to be whispering probably or speaking softly in order to hit 60 dBA if you're talking to somebody. When we were out doing our sound test and I had the meter in my hand the whole time, because we were in a group, most of the actual volume of people talking was more like 75 to 80 dBA because we were having to talk over each other and traffic noise. But, a normal conversation at normal levels is going to be around 65, just as a reference for what 60 means.
Yeah, this part seems a lot more restrictive than the section on specific things that are restricted during restricted hours, which says that, what's the language? You can't hear plainly audible speaking from 100 feet from the property line. Is that what it says?
I think something else to keep in mind is that, how in these sort of residential things is that the background noise level makes a big difference as well. And I think what we hear is not so much the absolute dBAs, it's the dBAs above background. So I think someone, if someone's working quietly at home and then it's like someone else is talking, in a normal conversational voice in the room, that's pretty loud and disruptive if it's, coming all the way from your neighbor's property. So I think the fact that it can be as loud as a normal conversation and also too loud, depending on the context, I think.
But this standard isn't for inside anybody's house. It's at the property line. Obviously, most people's houses would filter the sounds out quite a bit more.
Okay, yeah, sorry.
But I don't know. I mean, maybe it's okay. And I doubt that, hopefully we wouldn't get any, frivolous complaints about it, just, and if we do, I guess we can assess at the time that we get the complaint, whether or not we feel the standard's reasonable based on the complaint, and whatnot. It seems kind of restrictive to me. And I guess, I've made the point a couple other times that we're talking about an ordinance that goes across the entire county, every single lot size and whatnot. And I guess, I've made the argument that we require, restrictive covenants for most subdivisions that get approved. And they always have the option to decide for themselves, some of these standards, and they can make them more restrictive or less or whatever. So this is kind of a de minimis standard that we're establishing. So I just wanted to kind of have you all keep that in mind. And, to be applicable across every lot in the county, all across the county, from the most rural part to the most, densely developed.
Well, and some additional information, these levels are still above the average in cities. Now we're not a city, right? And so that's something that Chris keeps making that point, which is valid. And so we have bumped them up, but even lower dBAs are very common for these land use maximums across the country. The only noise complaints that we've had in the last year were about domestic tools, and those would be exempt during daytime hours unless really obnoxious. That's how you would use the chapter 11.03, which says you can't create a noise disturbance. That's to capture anything just super obnoxious. And then, we use our exemptions and the exception thing to try to create flexibility for the county. That's the way Les has made the recommendation.
So yeah, and I added a little bit more protective language. If you scroll down a little more, Christina,
Back to
wherever it was, just, the exemption doesn't allow unusually often occurring, I can't remember how I wrote it, but it's in there somewhere in the
That's right here.
A little bit.
Agricultural and gardening operations or such operations.
Well, I did actually amend that. I don't know why it didn't show up in the red line, but that wasn't.
No, actually.
So so basically.
Set E.
Yes, if, as long as such activity is not of unusual duration or occurrence, and hopefully that would capture, somebody that wanted to run their chainsaw every day for months on end or something like that. And we do have to realize that, statements like that are tough to quantify in court, but 9 times out of 10, these kind of complaints are resolved without going to that extent.
Well, I think it's good that we're going over this, but I'm okay with the ordinance as written. I think Chris makes some good points. On the other hand, we are using levels that seem to be higher than a lot of other communities use. So perhaps that's a good balance. We can revise it, just like the vehicle section, we can come back and revise it later. We're continuously revising the land use code to try to tweak it to do what we want. And we can do the same thing with the noise ordinance if part of these are seemed either too restrictive or not restrictive enough.
Okay, so let me go over what we changed. ATVs, it's just ATVs. So we've eliminated all the various references to different years. All other motor vehicles, we came up with a 9,000 pound rate and then we're at 92. The motorcycles, we're acknowledging the federal preemption, and if you have a stamp, that is sufficient. These poundage weights are consistent in the drive-by test. And then we've left in these two stamp requirements. And again,
just to be
motorcycles
clear-
in that table 1, motorcycles are the only thing regulated by federal law.
And then just on the table with the stamp requirements, it's like the street bike and off-road stamps are okay, but the closed competition bikes, if they have their own stamp, that's not going to work. Is that?
Right, so we're only exempting the 2, which is on-highway motorcycle stamp and off-highway motorcycle stamp.
Okay.
And that's it. Those are the changes from what we discussed earlier.
So are we
We're going-
ready for a motion then to adopt this, or?
Yes. Motion?
Yeah, I'll move to approve the proposed ordinance as revised today at our meeting, repealing Title 11 noise ordinance of Grand County General Ordinances and related ordinance number 602, and adopting the new Title 11 noise pollution ordinance of Grand County General Ordinances.
Motion by Jacques. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, so motion by Jacques, seconded by Kevin. Any further discussion? I do think we should, yes. I'm going to be happy to see the data. I'm hoping that will help make things clearer. This is so many unforeseen consequences.
Yeah, my
Okay.
only point of discussion is in terms of revisiting it, maybe I would suggest kind of early next calendar year before the peak visitation starts. So sometime in late January, early February, once budgeting season's done and audits are done and such. Maybe we take a look at the data then.
Let's plan on doing it at least on the second meeting in January, unless something comes up and we need to do it sooner, because we have so much to do on the first meeting. It's overwhelming. So if we had the second meeting in January, for sure we review this. But if need be, we can review it at any time.
Yeah, I would be inclined to review it as soon as we have the data that, allows us to set more sensible limits. And I don't, hope, it might be January, but hopefully it'll be sooner. But it'll
Yeah,
depend.
I guess I was saying January, the second meeting in the January would be the very latest time we would reevaluate, is how I'd like to look at it. But that's not part of the motion. But we could.
I guess I do want to, this is sort of a milestone getting the noise ordinance passed. So thanks. I know Chrissy's put lots of hours into this, and it's happening kind of on schedule. And I kind of feel like, things could easily have gone slower. So I'm glad we had such an active county attorney moving this along.
Yes, Chrissy, and just all of staff that has put so much time and effort into this. And the commission, who has spent many, many hours reading, studying, going to demonstrations, meetings. Okay, any further discussion?
Not done lightly.
Oh, but it's been hard. Okay, I'll call for a vote. I think I see everybody on. 1, 2, 3. All in favor of the motion, raise your hand, say aye. Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay. Okay, consent agenda. Ratifying the chair's signature on the Indigenous Defense Commission Equipment Grant Award Agreement. ratifying the chair's signature on noxious weed grant through the Utah Weed Supervisors Association, ratifying the chair's signature on the airport coronavirus response grant program agreement and associated cooperative agency agreement with the Aeronautical Operation Division of the Utah Department of Transportation. Do I have a motion to pass the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Motion by Sarah. Do I have a second by Jacques? Discussion. All in favor of the consent agenda? Aye. Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. We are to
Just a clarification, Mary, it's indigent defense,
indigent.
which means lacking financial resources.
I know. I apologize.
All right.
Little verbal dyslexia there.
All right.
So thank you. Thank you for the correction. And it passed unanimously, correct? We did vote. Okay, now we are moving to the discussion on code enforcement position, Chris Barrett.
Okay, so last December, the prior commissioners approved a budget for a code enforcement position. And then later, I think this commission approved the job description, but all along, in both cases, the position was mostly intended to be relative to COVID mitigation, event compliance, and TRT compliance, and that's the way the job description was written. But since, you know, all the noise ordinance stuff has come about and various other code enforcement needs, I actually think that we probably should retool that job description to be more comprehensive. Code enforcement could include, you know, the civil side of enforcement on the sound ordinance. I mean, this position is not a law enforcement officer, so they're not going to be pulling people over or anything, but they could potentially be going and doing the testing at the UTV rental places, but also just dealing with other land use compliance issues in general. We used to have a code enforcement position in the planning and zoning department, and we had an old job description for that. So what I'm thinking is to take those two job descriptions, the newer enforcement position that, you know, focuses on events and TRT, and just kind of combine that with the old planning and zoning code enforcement, and, you know, make sure it encompasses the noise ordinance as well, and repass the job description that way. I did misspeak last time. I said we didn't have any applicants, but I was made aware that we do in fact have applicants. And so I would just want to make sure that they were all okay with the revised job description as we discussed. But that, you know, it would have to be approved by the commission because it wouldn't be what I would consider to be a minor amendment to a job description. Anybody have any discussion or anything regarding that?
It sounds like a good idea to me, and I do think that we are going to need to start shifting resources into noise enforcement. This won't be the only thing, but it seems like a good start.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. So
I agree also, but just a point of or clarification, code enforcement cannot pull people over?
Not civil code enforcement. So there's a difference between criminal enforcement and civil enforcement.
And we have some criminal code.
Well, that would be deputized sheriffs, or, you know, I think that you can actually deputize under the prosecuting attorney's powers also, right, Christine? But in this case, what we're talking about is very specifically civil enforcement. And so civil infractions are not criminal infractions. So, you know, if somebody gets a ticket for for some civil infraction, it's going to be you know, a civil penalty as opposed to a criminal penalty. I don't know. We're not making a violation of, what is the status of the violation of a noise enforcement infraction? Is it a misdemeanor or a civil infraction?
It's a misdemeanor per the ordinance.
I think that the misdemeanor component, you know, do you think that a civil code enforcement officer would be able to do the testing at the rental companies?
Yes,
And also like land use code related?
yes, I do.
So I'm not intending this position to be doing traffic style noise enforcement. That's going to have to be a deputized position, law enforcement deputized position. But code enforcement, for the most part, you know, we're talking about maybe doing some in-field testing, but a lot of the times it's going to be doing a little investigation to see if a complaint is valid. And if it is, then they're going to put together a letter. They send the letter to the person that they see is in violation, and that starts the process. And then either they resolve the issue and it goes away and we're done, or they don't. And then we start to get serious about issuing, you know, some kind of ticket, I guess, or code violation. And then, you know, if they still are non-compliant, then we have to go to court and et cetera.
Yeah, Chris, I think it's, sorry. In the job description, would you also include the possibility of field site visits or whatever? I think some of these codes we've got about living in RVs and some of the other kind of dark sky stuff is going to involve actually going to locations. And I don't know if the previous code enforcer kind of had that in their job description. They were more checking VRBO listings and such for.
Well, I'm
so
sure.
I just want to.
I'm sure.
I'm
sure that the old planning and zoning one did, because, you know, doing investigations is necessary. And I don't know. I'd have to ask Christina. You know I don't know what the law is about going on somebody's property to do an investigation. I mean, even if it's a warrant, but I think you can observe from the road.
Yeah, I just meant
observable beyond the property boundary. There probably might be, but otherwise, don't you have to get a warrant to go on somebody's property? Christina?
Unless you have permission. So this is one reason why, you know, this code enforcement officer will need to work with, you know, law enforcement officer, or there's starting to be discussion about investigator that would work with, you know, the criminal prosecution team, but also all this civil code enforcement stuff. But typically, quite frankly, law enforcement shows up and they drive into your driveway and they start talking to the guy, and he can say, get off my property. And then you would need to go get a warrant. But most people engage in a conversation, and law enforcement observes what they observe and obtain what statements they do and go from there in a civil context.
I just hope that the position wouldn't be 100% desk job. I think that it would involve some eyes in the field, you know, not necessarily warrant based, but I hope that applicants realize what they're getting themselves into is all.
Well, yeah, and I'll work with Christina on the revision. But, you know, I just wanted to have this discussion before we hired somebody, so that they're, you know, even if we get to the point where we're at a draft job description, a new draft job description, we say, are you still okay as an, you know, remaining an applicant for this position? Because the job description that's in place right now is very specific to event, COVID enforcement, and TRT, and that's it. And I think our needs go well beyond that. And, you know, I think that COVID mitigation still obviously is an issue. We're the highest transmission rate in the state, but it's not going to be something hopefully that lasts a long, long time, you know, years and years and years. And so, you know, it's good to design job descriptions to be, you know, to last several years, not just, you know, several months. Do you have anything to add, Renee?
I don't, not right now.
Okay. All right. So I think we're probably good on that, unless anybody has any other comments.
Okay.
We'll pull something together then for the next meeting.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Calendar items, Mallory?
Yeah, To be honest, it's been very busy. I haven't even looked at the special events to see what's on there. I don't think there's much going on, at least in the next 2 weeks or so. Maybe I can't remember what it's called. Somebody wants to correct me on the full name, please do.
Yeah, the Grand Fondo is what you're talking
Grand Fondo.
Yes, thank you. Thank you both. That will be happening, or it's still going through the special event committee. I haven't been on their emails to see if it's been approved, but I know that it was going through the process. But some other things to have on your radar are the HDHO rules and regulations. Those appeals were all scheduled. So May 3rd at 1 p.m. there is the Sandstone Cottages appeal. The next day at 9 a.m., so that's May 4th, there is the Peak View. And then on May 6th, also at 9 a.m., there's Murphy Flats. So those are coming, and we're figuring out a few things, but we were able to finalize all of those. They will all be published in the newspaper on Thursday and the following Thursday. So I'm sure more to come, but unless there's any questions, that's all that I have.
Any questions? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mallory. A lot going on. We do not have a public hearing. Is there a need for a closed session? We have reached the end of our agenda. If I do not have any objections, I will adjourn this meeting. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Hard work.
Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Trish.